No, it would be better to disappear from this world altogether, Amanda said. Amanda looked up. She raised her head, trying to look up to the roof of the 16-story building. She had to squint all the time. Heavy drops of cold fall rain were falling from the sky. The girl was already completely soaked and cold. At least she should have been, because she had left the house in what she was wearing, shorts and a long, stretched t-shirt. And it's October outside. People are already wearing jackets and bouncing around, and then there's that nasty rain. But Amanda felt almost nothing physically right now. All of her senses were overshadowed by heartache. So much so that she didn't even want to live. What was there to live for? What was ahead of her now but shame and a meaningless, miserable existence? Not only that she had sealed her fate, but she would ruin her family's life if she stayed with them. That's why she'd come to the only high-rise in the neighborhood. The other houses were two low Khrushchev 5-story buildings, and the new building, a pleasant soft blue color, towered above them like an ornate candle. The best place could not be thought of. This frightening yet life-saving thought came to Amanda suddenly. She was home alone. Her younger brothers were at school, her father and stepmother at work. Rain drummed against the window, and Amanda sat on her bed with her arms wrapped around her knees and rocked. She seemed to cry when no one was home. The girl could afford to let her feelings come out. Sometimes it got a little easier, but not now, because soon everyone would know everything. She couldn't hide it from her family forever. Then what would she do? No one would support Amanda. They won't kick her out of the house, of course, but they'll blame her all the time. Because she's in trouble. Of course, life will be a never-ending nightmare. And it's all her fault, no one else's. I should have been so stupid. Amanda had never been very close to her father. He seemed to love her, his only daughter, but to talk to his child, to ask how she was doing. No, that never happened. Her father was interested in Amanda's grades, her household needs, sometimes her health. And that was it. The other thing is the sons, the common children with the new wife, Amanda's younger brothers. That's where the father went fishing with them and made jokes. What about the stepmother? When she first married her father, she seemed sympathetic to Amanda. But then she had children of her own, boys who were 1.5 years old. And the girl immediately felt superfluous, like a fifth wheel on a cart. No, her stepmother didn't starve her and didn't bog her down with work, as in old fairy tales, but she didn't give her any warmth. She performed her duties to bring up her stepdaughter as an unloved, but necessary work. That's all. Amanda might not have noticed her parents' coldness toward herself, but she saw how they treated Michael and Timothy, and that sometimes made her hurt and resentful. And lonely. Well, what did you want? Amanda was once enlightened by her neighbor in the stairwell, Aunt Lucy. The girl then studied in the 8th grade and complained to her acquaintance that none of her parents could not come to her on a school holiday. For stepmother, you are a stranger. And your father. Men, they love children from their favorite women. And the woman he loves is his current wife. What about Mom? Amanda took offense to Mom. Tatiana is his past Aunt Lucy sighed heavily. She was once friends with Amanda's mother. Your stepmother is your real stepmother. That's the conclusion to draw. Tears sprang from Amanda's eyes again at the memory of her dearest person. How she missed her mom right now. Mom would definitely have supported her daughter in a difficult situation if she had been there for her. Amanda wouldn't be afraid of anything at that moment. Together they would definitely think of something. Mom never scolded Amanda. If the girl was wrong, she would calmly point out her mistakes and explain at length, in detail, with examples, telling her why it was necessary to act this way and not that way. At that moment, Amanda felt so happy, so loved. Mom was the closest and dearest person for the girl. Her smile was as warm as the sun, and her tender hands seemed to protect her from all troubles and misfortunes. Once Amanda thought her mom was eternal, strong, reliable, and vulnerable. How wrong she was. The tragedy happened when the girl was in the 1st grade. Amanda, as always, came home after school, heated food from the refrigerator, had lunch, did her homework. Her mom was about to come home from work, followed by her dad. A cozy evening with the family lay ahead. Mom would probably come back with buns from the factory canteen. They're so fluffy, so fragrant. Adult and child will drink tea together and talk about everything in the world. Amanda will tell her parents how her teacher praised her today. But it was 7, then 8, and Mom and Dad were still gone. Darkness thickened outside the window. From the street came the long howl of the wind. The February weather had gotten worse. Amanda realized something was wrong. She crawled onto the couch, piled up her pillows, and waited. She was so scared alone in an empty apartment. If only she had a little sister or a brother, it would be more fun together. Amanda asked her parents many times to give birth to someone else, but they laughed and explained that they had a small apartment, 2 rooms only. They would expand, and then they could think about it. Finally, the key turned in the lock. Amanda's heart quickened. She rushed to meet her parents. When she saw her mother, everything would become simple and not scary. Her smile, her voice always drove away fears and worries. On the doorstep stood her father alone. Amanda felt disappointed. It had better be Mom. But it was good that at least Dad had come. He was more fun and less scary. But why is he so glum? His face is literally blank. And what's that alien look in his eyes? Where's Mom? Amanda asked. And then the father told his daughter the terrible truth, which the girl could not believe for a long time afterwards. It turned out that in the factory shop, where her mother worked, there was an accident. The boiler burst. There was a fire. Not everyone was saved. Amanda's mom was among the dead. Then there were funerals, but Amanda was not taken to them, left with neighbors. They thought that she was too young for such shocks. It was as if the girl had been turned off. For several years she could not smile and almost did not speak. She studied, ate, went to school, even it seems, played with her friends. But she did everything by inertia, machine-like. Amanda herself still remembered her feelings well. It seemed to her that she was in an unreal imaginary world, where everything was not real. That's why she didn't feel anything a protective reaction of her body. I guess her father was doing the best he could to take care of his daughter. But he wasn't very good at it. Dad couldn't cook, but he was good at frying potatoes. He couldn't braid Amanda's hair either. Honestly, he tried. But they came out sloppy and smelly. In the end, Amanda had to learn to do a lot of things on her own. A kind neighbor, Aunt Lucy, her mother's friend, told her something and she did it herself. Domestic problems distracted Amanda a little and even relieved her condition. Fatigue drowned out the heartache, and yet the girl was very longing. So long that it is impossible to express in words. At night she cried quietly into her pillow, so as not to disturb her father. He promised to take her to a doctor if she didn't come to her senses, but Amanda didn't want to see a doctor, so she put up with it. Gradually, life fell into a familiar pattern. It became less pleasant, less cozy and bright. But there was still room for joy and pleasure in her life. Amanda had desires, dreams, and feelings. It was as if she was revitalized, strengthened, made stronger. And then, 2 years after the tragic events, Amber, the stepmother, appeared in the house. Her father worked as a driver at the bakery, delivering products to stores and stores, sometimes taking his daughter on trips. Amanda loved sitting in the high cab, looking down on the cars. What did it smell like in there? The aroma of fresh baked goods was unmatched. Amber worked as a clerk at one of the outlets her father operated. That's how they met. At first, Amber seemed like a kind, warm-hearted woman. Smiling, attentive, homemaker. What about her cooking? Oh my God. Pancakes, pies, borscht. Amanda learned a lot from her. The girl was happy. Of course, no one could replace her mother, but a woman's hand in their house was definitely lacking. True, the neighbor Lucy from the very beginning was inclined to Amber cool, to put it mildly. Amanda noticed this dislike of her mom's friend and didn't understand the reason. Then Michael was born. Amanda was happy. She had once dreamed of a brother. The girl helped Amber with everything. Her big sister was a joy to be around, but her stepmother's attitude toward her help had changed. She began to be annoyed by things that before she did not even pay attention to. Why buy old clothes? Do you still have a closet full? Amber reprimanded her spouse. Michael needs a new fall suit. He's growing up fast. Why didn't your daughter do the dishes? What am I, the maid, cleaning up after all of you? I have a baby in my arms. I don't have time. The stepmother would get angry another time, and so on. It got to the point where Amanda tried to avoid seeing the woman again, so as not to cause a new outburst of irritation and aggression. But it didn't help. Amber always found something to pick on. And it was hard not to have contact in a cramped 2-room apartment. Stepmother, father, and baby lived in the living room. Amanda had her own tiny but cozy and, most importantly, separate room. Here the girl felt in relative peace and safety. Only a year after Michael's appearance in the family was born another child, Tamati, and the eldest son was immediately moved into the nursery to Amanda. Now she had to neighbor with a 1.5-year-old baby, who invariably threw her textbooks and notebooks and cried a lot at night. But Amanda was not allowed to complain. Her father would support her stepmother, and she would be completely on her son's side. So she had to bear it. Moreover, sooner or later you get used to everything. When Tamati grew up a little, he was also moved into the nursery. The parents bought the boys bunk beds, which occupied the entire wall. Along the other wall stood Amanda's sofa. There was a desk under the window. There was no room for anything else in the room. Cramped but not cramped, Amber said of the nursery. She also dreamed of the time when Amanda would finally grow up and move away, either to study in another city or get married. I don't think we'll be able to get a bigger apartment, Amber reasoned. Times are hard, but Amanda's already a bride, and when she leaves, the place will be free, and the boys will have more room. And so will we. These dreams of her stepmother, spoken aloud, made the girl feel even more unnecessary and unloved. And the father? He did not even object to his wife, as if he too thought that Amanda's presence alone prevented everyone from living. Amanda finished 9 grades and entered a school to become a pastry chef. She wanted to become independent sooner, to get a job, rent an apartment, and move away from her family, who considered her a burden. Amanda had a group of wonderful girls. She immediately made friends with Lucy, a small, cheerful, carefree, and completely good-natured girl. It was easy and pleasant to communicate with her. Once Amanda had a person with whom she could share her worries. Emily pitied her friend, scolded her stepmother, and very often invited Amanda to her house. Emily lived in a spacious apartment with her grandmother. The girl had never seen her father, and her mother was building a personal life somewhere on the side. In some ways, the fates of girlfriends were similar. Both of them did not know parental love. But Emily was luckier. She had a caring grandmother who did not care about her granddaughter. At the beginning of summer was Emily's birthday, her coming of age, and the girl decided to celebrate not anywhere, but in a nightclub. I've never been to such a place before. Emily's eyes were burning with impatience. I'm 18, and I've never been to a club before. Neither have I, Amanda admitted. This is ridiculous. We need to fix this right now. And so the girls found themselves in a nightclub. All that music, the ear-splitting bass, the crowd of young people on the dance floor. The girls were a little confused at first. I wanted to go home right away, Amanda admitted, but Emily held her back. Wait, we haven't understood anything yet. What if we like it? Emily firmly dragged her friend to a vacant table. I think they ordered a pizza and a Coke. They didn't get drinks. Not you, or I have never had a drink before, Amanda said reasonably. I don't know what it'll do to us. And we're all alone here, Emily agreed. The girls went to the dance floor. The cheerful Emily blended right in with the crowd. She caught the rhythm and began to dance naturally and harmoniously. But Amanda felt constrained and awkward, tried to make some movements with her hands and feet, but seemed ridiculous to herself. It was good that it was dark, noisy and crowded. Hardly anyone paid attention to her. But Amanda was wrong. In fact, James was already following her. Only the girl didn't even realize it at the time. He was attracted by Amanda's differentness from the others. The girls from the club are all the same. Nothing new, nothing interesting. I've already looked at all of them. And then suddenly this modest and beautiful, incredibly slender, long-legged, a natural beauty. But how could I pass her up? James approached Amanda's table when she was alone. Emily was on the dance floor, oblivious to the world and looking very happy. Amanda, on the other hand, was still kind of uncomfortable, awkward, uncomfortable, but she didn't want to ruin her friend's party. Let her have fun. Birthday girl. Amanda sat at the table, looking at the people dancing. It was interesting to look at the outfits and hairstyles of the girls, the faces of the guys. There was a lot of people here, both green school children and people of almost parental age. Excuse me, can I sit down? Amanda heard. She shifted her gaze to the person speaking. It was a handsome guy in a tight black t-shirt, emphasizing the relief of muscles and obviously not cheap jeans. The young man was looking directly at Amanda and smiling openly. Do you mind if I sit down? The stranger repeated his question. No, of course not, Amanda said. Good. The guy smiled even wider and sat down directly opposite Emily's seat. My name is James. I've been watching you for a long time. I thought I'd introduce myself. Amanda was embarrassed she had no experience with the opposite sex. At school, boys didn't pay much attention to Amanda. They chose more colorful and risky girls. And Amanda was always quiet, modest. She was afraid to say an extra word. And in college, they didn't have any guys in their group. And now a young man wants to meet her. He likes her. How is that possible? And the guy's handsome, confident, and apparently not poor. Amanda had no idea how to talk to him, although she really wanted to. But James acted like they'd known each other forever, talking about things, joking, complimenting Amanda. And soon the girl's shyness was gone. Amanda didn't notice how she got involved in the conversation. She laughed at the jokes of her charming interlocutor, answered his questions, listened to stories from James's cheerful student life. The guy studied at the best university in the city at a prestigious law school. He was also involved in sports. He was a member of the university volleyball team. Lived with his parents in an apartment in the city center. He worked part-time at a pizzeria as a cook's assistant and drove his own car. Amanda stared into his cheerful eyes of an amazing emerald hue and felt like she was falling in love, for the first time in her life. A racing heartbeat, lightheadedness, a desire to be as close to him as possible. Weren't those the signs of falling in love? James was drawn to Amanda too. The girl could feel it and see it in his interested gaze. The guy was showering her with compliments. Amanda couldn't believe her happiness. And she was desperately afraid to disappoint her new acquaintance, to say something wrong or do something. In fact, she was terrified of pushing James away. "Oh, it's your friend." It wasn't Emily who came back to the table. It was Amanda. She'd already forgotten that she'd come to the nightclub with a friend. It seemed that the perceptive Emily understood everything from her friend's eyes. James, the guy, introduced himself and immediately stood up, giving way to the girl. Wow, what a gallant, a real gentleman. Emily marveled. "I'm actually on my way out." She looked at Amanda questioningly. She understood her friend's look. Emily wondered if she was the third extra, asking if it was time for her to leave. Amanda didn't know what to say to her friend. On the one hand, she didn't want to leave James, to be here alone with him. What could be more wonderful? On the other hand, it wasn't an easy decision to make, because, well, it was just scary. Honestly, this was the first time Amanda was seeing this man. What would James think of her if she agreed to be alone with a guy she didn't even know? And James understood the girl's hesitation. Amazing sensitivity. "I could drive you both home," he offered. "Only on the condition that Amanda leave me her phone number." The girl smiled. He would drive them both. That's a whole different matter. And James also asks for her phone number. But of course she will gladly give him those numbers. James' car was parked in the wide parking lot in front of the club. A black Chevrolet Cruze, not an expensive foreign car, but quite a nice car for a young guy. Amanda rejoiced. Lucky James wasn't rich. The guy drove the girls to Emily's house. Tonight Amanda had a sleepover at her friend's house. The parents had been warned about it in advance. Emily went out first. For a moment, Amanda and James were left alone in the cabin. The guy took advantage of this and took Amanda's palm in his hand and brought it to his lips. It was a very gallant kiss that filled Amanda's heart with light and warmth. "I'll be sure to call you tomorrow," James said. Amanda will be waiting for him to leave. Emily pounced on her friend with questions. She was curious to know how Amanda had gotten her hands on the handsome man. "I don't know," Amanda shrugged. "He picked me somehow." "Lucky you," Emily sighed. "I was making eyes at a guy on the dance floor, but he didn't even pay attention to me." "You'll get there," Amanda smiled. And then she added, "I'm just afraid he won't call me back." "He will," she said confidently. "The way he was looking at you. If someone looked at me like that, I'd be so happy." Emily was right. James did call back the next morning and invited Amanda to the movies. It was the opening night of another big superhero blockbuster. And there, in the darkness of the auditorium, James kissed Amanda for the first time. The girl even felt dizzy. She didn't know how to behave in such a situation. It was her first kiss. James seemed to realize that. "What about you? Were you seeing anyone else before me?" he asked, pulling back slightly and looking into Amanda's eyes. "No," she said, embarrassed. "Well, that's it." Now James would realize how ridiculous and worthless she was. She was almost 18, and she hadn't even been on a real date yet. There must be something wrong with her. Who would want her like that? But to Amanda's surprise, the negative answer pleased James. His eyes shone with joy. A wide smile lit up his face. He suddenly put his arms around Amanda gently and pulled her close to him. The girl felt his heart beating and melted with happiness. Some events were unfolding on the screen, but the meaning of the movie kept slipping away from Amanda. He was there. James put his arm around her shoulders, stroked her hair from time to time, and sometimes he looked at her silently and smiled at her. They often met, went to cafes and movies, went on rides, just wandered around the picturesque streets and neighborhoods. Sometimes James would take Amanda out of town. He knew so much about so many things. Young people then went to the waterfalls, then to the mountain with flowering plants. It turns out that in the vicinity of his hometown, a lot of interesting and beautiful. And Amanda had no idea. "You have a boyfriend now." "And I'm still alone," Emily envied her friend a little. "You'll have a boyfriend, too," Amanda replied. "Maybe, but when? You have a boyfriend now, and I'm still alone, with no one to go out with." So Amanda was a little embarrassed to tell her friend about her meetings with James, each of which turned into a magical adventure. Why would she want to hurt Emily's feelings? Happiness loves silence. Amanda didn't know where she'd first heard that beautiful expression, but she thought they were very wise words. Amanda finally felt loved. It turned out to be an incredibly pleasant feeling. James took care of her, opening the car door in front of her, giving her something to eat all the time. And if it got chilly, he took off his jacket and threw it over Amanda's shoulders. He was so sensitive, so attentive. James seemed to pick up on any change in the girl's mood and anticipate her desires. Love, support, attention Amanda lacked it in her family. And here comes a guy who enveloped her with warmth, like a cotton blanket. Of course, James quickly became for her the most native and close person. Sometimes at night in bed, Amanda couldn't sleep and thought about how she had lived without James. Too bad James was a very busy young man. School, work, and his grandmother in the village, to whom he often traveled with groceries. The guy couldn't spend as much time with Amanda as she would have liked. By the way, he often regretted it out loud. "Baby, I want to hold you in my arms and hold you 24 hours a day. You are so amazing, but I have so much to do, my head is spinning sometimes." Amanda, lying in James's arms, understood. She felt sorry for the guy. He must be very tired, running around like a squirrel in a wheel. But he seemed to like the active life. That's good, too. Her father and stepmother didn't notice the change in Amanda's behavior. They did not see the happy glint in her eyes and thought that the girl spent a lot of time with her friend. One day, during a safety lecture, Amanda suddenly felt sick. It was early morning, the first class. The girl was groggy from the morning. But then the teacher suddenly spoke about the smell of raw fish, and Amanda felt it. Her eyes even darkened. No, she rushed for the exit. She had to make it. And Amanda did. How could she vomit? She'd never been like this before. "What's wrong with you?" Lucy came to ask. "You look so pale." "I was sent to see if you were all right." "I think I'm fine," Amanda smiled. She suddenly felt strangely weak. Even her knees trembled. "Are you pregnant by any chance?" Emily asked. "No, I'm not." Amanda shook her head negatively and suddenly thought about it. It was entirely possible. It was unlikely, of course, but not impossible. Her stomach suddenly felt cold. Cold from the sudden realization. Emily said confidently. "No," Amanda admitted. "Then take the test." "I don't know why not." "I'm afraid," Amanda admitted honestly. On the way home, she stopped by the drugstore and bought a test. Something inside her told her that the result would be positive. Amanda had almost no doubts about it, and she was right. The test showed 2 bright stripes. It was a good thing no one was home at that time. Her brothers at school, her parents at work. Amanda shakily made her way to her couch and collapsed on it. Tears rolled from her eyes. The girl could not understand her own feelings. On the one hand, her heart was overflowing with joy and tenderness. She had a baby under her heart, a very real baby. Her baby, hers and James's. What a beautiful and wonderful creature it must be. On the other hand, Amanda didn't feel ready for motherhood. She wasn't even 18 yet. She wouldn't turn 18 until next month. No profession obtained, no job. What's she going to do with a baby? She's not ready. But the baby has a father, James, on the other hand, is doing just fine. He's studying, working, even owns his own car. His parents have a big apartment. He's mentioned it many times. I'm sure there's plenty of room for everyone. So it would seem. All the conditions for the creation of a family are there. But how would James take this news? Amanda was very worried about that question. It seems that the guy sincerely loves her, gives gifts, tends to spend any free minute with her. There are not many of them in his busy life. There was only one way to test it. Amanda would always remember that evening. James had invited her for an evening stroll along the waterfront. Dusk had already fallen. The light of the lanterns gave the setting a special charm. James held Amanda's hand. They walked in silence along the parapet behind which the wide river carried its waters. Quiet, calm, majestic. There was a nice fresh breeze. The first stars appeared in the sky. I need to talk to you. Amanda decided that there was no point in waiting any longer. She had tried to tell James about their baby several times before, but she hadn't had the courage. Now he would finally find out, give her a hug, a smile, a little scolding for her indecision. And everything would be fine. About what? James was still smiling nonchalantly. He couldn't imagine what he would hear in a few seconds. James, I mean, we're having a baby. Amanda sucked in a breath. There was a heavy pause. Amanda stared into James's eyes, trying to figure out what he was feeling right now, and she didn't see any joyful emotions on the boy's face. Finally, he sighed heavily. Are you sure? Yes, Amanda nodded. Several tests have already come back positive. What's the timing of all this? The boy looked puzzled and upset. Seeing that look on his face, almost squeamish, was very painful for Amanda. The girl's eyes suddenly filled with tears. With a willful effort, she chased them back. What are you going to do? James looked at Amanda and waited for an answer. The girl shrugged her shoulders. She had hoped it would be James who would tell her what to do, reassure her and support her. But he seemed to be as confused and scared as she was. There was no trace of his usual confidence. Right before Amanda's eyes, he was transformed. The adult, all-powerful James, capable of solving any problem, disappeared. And in his place was a boy green, inexperienced, a coward. You're pathetic, even. Amazing metamorphosis, Amanda thought. So how do you plan to deal with it? James repeated his question. Amanda let go of her boyfriend's hand. He didn't want a serious relationship. This naive girl was already starting to bore him. At first, her enthusiasm, her ability to enjoy the little things, had attracted and mesmerized James. Amanda looked at him with such eyes that he felt strong and omnipotent. It was an interesting experience. He'd never met a girl like her before, but gradually it bored him. James was once again drawn to bright, bold beauties. He planned to break up with Amanda gradually over the next 2 weeks, without scandals or hard feelings. And then she said it. I'm pregnant. James pulled away involuntarily, as if he wanted to run away. No, Amanda shook her head. We have to have an abortion. James seized on the thought. Money wasn't a problem. The term was short. It would be quick and easy. We'll go to the clinic tomorrow. I'm about to turn 18. Minors will tell their parents and they'll kill me, Amanda reminded him. If you don't, they'll kill you, James insisted. It's going to be noticeable soon anyway, Amanda shook her head. I have time to think of something, but we can't let anyone find out now. You're insane, James said. And sneaky. From a poor family? Maybe it's a way to make money. Amanda stared at him in amazement. How ugly he looked. Could she really fall in love with someone like that? It's not going to work, he said. My aunt works in the court. She will make the documents. And you won't be able to prove that the child is mine. Maybe it's not mine at all. Amanda sighed heavily, turned around and walked away. Away from James and his hurtful, nasty words. The voice of the man she had recently loved with all her soul came through. Get out of here so I don't have to see you. I'll never recognize him, do you hear me? You can't prove anything. If you try, I'll crush you. Amanda didn't doubt that James had the strength to crush her. But she wasn't going to fight him, and she didn't even want to see him now. The prince had turned out to be a coward and a scoundrel. Amanda was almost running down the embankment. The blood was pounding in her temples. An unpleasant chill spread through her body. At some point, she noticed the wary glances of passers-by and realized that her face was wet with tears. She felt an unbearable pain in her solar plexus. For a moment, she stopped thinking about the baby. Her disappointment had overshadowed her, and her soul was dark and disgusting. Had all of James's words, his reassurances, his tender glances and kisses been lies? That evening, Amanda walked about 10 kilometers home, not even noticing the distance. She tried to concentrate on her steps, seemingly counting them to distract herself from her heavy thoughts. In front of the apartment door, Amanda wiped her tears and smoothed her hair. She had to look normal, so her stepmother and father wouldn't suspect anything. It wasn't hard. They usually paid little attention to her. The stepmother was in the kitchen. The father was humming in the bathroom. Michael and Tamati were playing a console in the living room. The room was vacant. Wonderful. Amanda collapsed on the couch, turned her back to the wall, and instantly fell into a sound sleep. The morning is ancient in the evening. Tomorrow, surely she'd think of something. But Amber didn't think of tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or the day after tomorrow, or the week after. Amanda went to school as usual. Summer vacation wasn't over yet, but students had to attend a special block of lectures before their last course. But what are we going to do? Emily, the only one who knew about Amanda's situation, often asked, unless you counted James, who had probably forgotten about the whole thing like a bad dream by now. I have no idea, the girl shrugged. I'll figure something out. Thither time went on and still no solution was found. The morning sickness had disappeared somewhere, and Amanda sometimes now even forgot that she was carrying a child under her heart. She felt nothing at all. Sometimes the thought even crept into her head, maybe the tests are all lies, but it can't be that a pregnant woman feels completely normal, can it? What about mood swings, strange taste preferences, rabid appetite? August came to an end, September flew by. And then one gloomy, chilly October morning, Amanda realized she couldn't button her favorite and only neat jeans at the waist. Her stomach had grown, it seemed, overnight. Just like that, almost instantaneously. Amanda lifted up her shirt and scrutinized herself in the mirror. Yes, she definitely looked pregnant now. No matter how hard the girl tried, she couldn't get that belly in. Tears came to her eyes. Her head snapped up. Well, this is it. Now everyone will see. Everyone will realize what she's done, and why Amanda took so long to do anything about it. Why didn't she listen to James and go to the hospital in time? Honestly, she'd thought everything would sort itself out. Foolish and naive to believe such a thing. But the girl still hoped that the tests were wrong, or that the pregnancy would suddenly stop developing. Foolish, unsupported dreams. Now Amanda realized how carelessly she had behaved in a difficult situation, hid her head in the sand, like a stupid ostrich. The reason for that could have been those pregnancy hormones. And fear, of course. Fear of parents, of doctors, of the future. And now the falling belly reminded Amanda that the problem wasn't going anywhere, and she couldn't put it off any longer. Even if she continued to keep quiet, they would notice. The first, of course, would be the stepmother. She'll say to the father, "God, how can I live with myself?" That morning, Amanda walked to the school with her jeans unbuttoned. No one noticed. She wore a long, wide t-shirt on top. If only everything else was as easy to fix, she thought. And then there was Emily not being around. A friend was sick. She'd had heart problems since childhood. Suddenly, at the end of the summer, it had gotten worse. Emily was taken to the capital for surgery. The friend will be there for at least 2 or 3 months, if not longer. She even took a leave of absence from school. Amanda was worried about her friend. They talked every night, supporting each other. And yet the absence of the only understanding and kind-hearted person at such a moment was an additional challenge for Amanda. On that gray, overcast October day, Amanda returned from school in a gloomy mood. As always, she found on the refrigerator a list of things to do, from her stepmother: wipe the floors, cook dinner, buy some groceries. But today the girl had no energy even for these household chores. On the morning of her first class, Amanda felt the baby inside her move. In the first moment, she experienced non-rational feelings: tenderness, joy, love. It seemed, in general, some kind of warmth for the baby that was growing inside her. And then a very different emotion came over her. Amanda finally realized that inside her was a living person with arms, legs, and heart, and maybe even with feelings. This is a huge responsibility, unbearable for Amanda. She can't even tell her parents about this person. Still hasn't made up her mind. What kind of mother is she for the rest of the day? The girl remained in gloomy silence. No one touched Amanda much. She saw no way out. Life seemed a burden. The people around her were cold, indifferent, evil. And in this world she wants to bring a child, what can such a mother give her? Nothing, not even basic protection. And now, sitting in an empty, quiet apartment, Amanda thought over the decision. A terrible, irrevocable, but, it seems, the only right one. The girl was overcome with doubts. Of course, it was not easy to take such a step. But the more she thought about her situation, the more she was convinced that she had to act. What's the point of staying here? She asked herself. My father doesn't need me, and my stepmother doesn't need me. She'd be glad to have a place for her own beloved children. Even James, who had once seemed so loving and caring, had betrayed her. How can anyone ever be trusted? Amanda is alone in this whole world, and no one will ever help her. Except Emily. But she needs support herself. Bad things happen to mostly good people, to people who don't deserve it. To keep herself from changing her mind, Amanda got up from her cozy couch and walked outside in what she was wearing. It was pouring rain. The homemade shorts and t-shirt were clearly not appropriate for the weather. Amanda could see goosebumps on her bare arms and legs, but somehow she didn't feel cold. The girl knew where she was going. There was only one place in their neighborhood suitable for Amanda's plan, a new building, a 16-story building. They say it has spacious apartments with high ceilings and big windows. Must be nice to live in a place like that. And here's Amanda standing outside this building, looking up. It's not hard to climb up the fire escape to the roof. And then, scary. But where do you go? Strangers were rushing past. Some glanced at Amanda with indifferent eyes. Others did not notice a teenage girl freezing in the October rain in summer shorts and a t-shirt. Everyone has their own business, everyone has their own worries. What to speak of strangers, if even her own father didn't care about Amanda? Child, are you all right? Amanda shuddered with surprise when she heard a dry and at the same time concerned voice. The girl turned around and met the gaze of worried light blue eyes. Before her stood an old woman in a long cloak. Small, thin, slightly hunched, pale. Thin strands of gray hair were poking out from under her gray shawl. What? Amanda didn't understand. She was far away from here now. Her heart clenched with fear. Her legs were stiff and she was shivering. What are you up to? As if the old woman had read the girl's thoughts. Come to my place. I'll warm you with tea, and you'll tell me everything. Amanda wanted to refuse, but the old woman spoke in a tone that did not tolerate objections, confident and at the same time kind and affectionate. She looked at Amanda with sympathy and curiosity. She cared. The stranger really wanted to know what misfortune had befallen this young girl. And it wasn't idle interest. Amanda felt that the old woman wanted to help her. Amazing. Amazing. Could this really happen? Amanda obediently followed the old woman. She was saying something as she walked and kept looking back, as if checking to see if the strange girl was following her. Only when she was in the old woman's small, clean apartment did Amanda realize that she was very cold. The warmth took her into its embrace, gave her a feeling of security and satisfaction. Amanda suddenly remembered what she had just wanted to do and shuddered. Now the thought seemed terribly wrong. Come into the kitchen, the old woman smiled and gestured to the table. What kind of tea do you like, black or green? Black with milk, please, if I may. Why not? The old woman put the kettle on the stove, took out dishes and simple food from the cupboard, store cookies, wafers, cheap candies, homemade jam. All of it was soothing to Amanda. She relaxed, felt pleasantly sleepy. It felt so good here. An island of calm and comfort in the middle of a gray, crazy world. Well, everything is ready, the old woman said. Amanda finally finished setting the table and sat down across from her guest. Now tell me what your trouble is. Lucy was embarrassed. She wanted to open up to this kind woman, but what would she think when she found out? Judgment, of course. Of that there was no doubt. Lucy was afraid to tell even her own family. And people of the older generation are even more categorical in such matters. Don't be embarrassed or afraid of anything, sighed the old woman. By the way, I don't think I introduced myself. My name is Pamela, and you're Amanda? That's a wonderful name. It's what I wanted to name my daughter. I've dreamed of having kids my whole life, but it never came true. I haven't dreamed yet, but I have, Amanda confessed to herself. Realizing that there was no retreat, she added, I'm expecting a baby. And I just turned 18. My boyfriend left me. And I can't tell my parents. That's all. Now the old lady will condemn her and throw her out on the street. Maybe she'll give her a lecture on morality first. And she'd be right, by the way. Amanda really is stupid and unscrupulous to be in this situation. But Pamela suddenly did something completely unexpected. She walked over to Amanda and hugged her tightly and very gently. And then Amanda couldn't take it anymore. All the worries and fears of the last few days began to come out of her with tears and sobs. The old woman soothingly stroked her back with her hard, dry palm and said something softly. Amanda couldn't make out all the words, but Pamela seemed to be telling her not to hold back and to cry as much as she needed to. When the tears dried up, Amanda, to her surprise, felt better. Strength and energy came from somewhere. Even breathing became easier. That's good. Pamela smiled at her, returning to her seat. Sometimes you need to cry. Now tell me more about it. We'll see what we can do to help you. Amanda smiled at the kind old woman. Was there really one person in the world who wanted to help her? It was true, she wasn't alone anymore. Amanda took a deep breath and told Pamela everything about her mother who had left so early, about her stepmother and father, and about James. Of course, he was especially hard to remember. Amanda also mentioned Amber, who was now in a hospital 100 kilometers away. Pamela listened without interrupting. Amanda could see in her face that the old woman was not judging her guest. She pities, sympathizes, worries, but definitely remains on the girl's side. Amanda felt Pamela's support and approval, and it gave her strength and confidence. That was it. Amanda finished her story. So why did you come here? To the high rise. Pamela frowned. Amanda lowered her eyes. Now she was afraid to admit what she had wanted to do only 40 minutes ago. But the old woman seemed to understand. You're just like me, she said suddenly, and shook her head. I was in the same situation too, and I didn't see any way out. I didn't want to live. So girl, don't think that you are alone. And don't blame yourself for anything. You fell in love? Lost your head? Who doesn't? Especially since you don't see affection and care at home. So your heart went out to this James. And he's a coward. What can you do? Amanda looked at Pamela in surprise. The old woman had managed to express so clearly in words what she felt. She'd only gotten involved with James because she'd been missing his affection, care, and attention for a long time, ever since her mother had passed away. It seemed to Amanda that now, finally, she wasn't alone. She had James. She wanted it so badly that she probably didn't pay attention to the alarm bells. Were there any? Of course there were. I've been in the same situation myself, Pamela sighed. Had you? Amanda had forgotten her own distress for a moment. Would you tell me? Pamela grinned. It was a difficult story for her. But the girls sitting in front of her now, it was important to hear it. Perhaps fate itself had brought them together. It was no coincidence that Amanda had gotten in Pamela's way at the right and crucial moment. No, the old woman was sure that the girl would not have committed this terrible act. Most likely she would have come to her senses on the way to the roof or standing on the edge. Pamela saw in Amanda's eyes that she wanted to live and had even managed to love her baby. Yes, the girl was in a difficult position, but it would all pass. And fears and pain will not be easy. And yet there are many good things ahead for Amanda. The girl will realize this once she calms down a little. Pamela's story should help Amanda calm down, at least for a confused girl. It will be interesting to hear the story of someone who has had to experience the same thing she herself has. Pamela had it harder, I think. Times were different. A lot more was required of girls then than it is now. Tell me, Amanda asked, looking at Pamela curiously. It won't take long. Do you have time? I do now. Amanda made herself comfortable in her chair and prepared to listen. Pamela was born in a small town to a large family. Her father and mother worked on the collective farm. Every morning they had to go to another town. Both of them returned late. Accordingly, the household and the younger children were in the care of the eldest daughter. The nimble and agile Pamela coped with everything playfully. She returned from school, quickly did her homework and began to do things to clean the floors, cook lunch and dinner, wash and hang the laundry. Work burned in young Pamela's hands. She even had time to go for a walk with her girlfriends before picking up the younger ones from daycare. Then you can't get away from the little ones. For such children need an eye, and an eye this Pamela learned very well. By her 15th birthday, the girl dreamed of being a teacher. Most of all, she liked math and physics. These were the subjects she wanted to teach children when she grew up. Teachers praised the clever student and predicted a great future for her. And so it turned out in the end. But at what cost? It happened so that in a neighboring town died sister of Pamela's father. A very young woman's heart failed. The head of the family died at the front a few years ago, so that the children were left round orphans. There were 4 of them. Neighborhood children decided to distribute among relatives, and the eldest daughter, 15-year-old Emma, was given to Pamela's family. Emma seemed to be the same age as Pamela. But friendship between the girls did not work. 2 different characters. Cheerful, quick-witted Pamela and slow, thoughtful Emma seemed somehow different, and they had nothing to talk about. Emma, unlike her cousin, was not very eager to study. But she was a wonderful hostess who could cook complicated dishes and clean so well that everything sparkled. Emma had no patience for clutter, and she put things in their proper places. It was like it was in her blood. To herself, Emma didn't seem overly affluent, carefree, unserious. And she was always making remarks to her sister she dusted the wrong way, washed the dishes too long, and kneaded the dough the wrong way. This irritated Pamela, which of course did not contribute to the strengthening of relations between the sisters. Parents also added oil to the fire. They constantly set Emma as an example to their eldest daughter. "Look how clever Emma is," praised her niece mother. "Such a wife to anyone for happiness." "And what about me?" Pamela was indignant. "I do my chores too, and look after the children and clean. I've managed without her before. How am I any worse?" "You laugh too loudly and answer too much," said the father. How it annoyed young Pamela. But there was a great advantage to Emma's arrival. Now the girls shared the household chores equally, and Pamela had more free time to go out with her friends. Emma had no desire to go out. She hadn't made friends with anyone from the neighborhood. So the girl quietly let her cousin Emma go out in the evenings and looked after the little ones. "Okay, go," Emma sighed every time I left her, she grumbled. "Sister's just for show." In fact, she was even glad to stay, at least for a while, as mistress of the house. Oh, those evenings young Pamela needed them. Evenings were the best time. Pamela still recalled with nostalgia her walks through Nashville in the company of teenagers like herself. The things they did. They played like kids, slid down snowy mountains, played soccer, jumped over the fire, and swam in the river after sunset, despite their parents' prohibitions. It was fun and good fun. Adults watched the fun of boys and girls with a smile. Probably they remembered the time when they were like that themselves. Sometimes one of the men even joined the noisy company, which caused laughter and approval of teenagers. One of those men was sometimes Ben. He had not lived in Nashville for a long time, but he often visited his parents who remained here. Ben himself at one time went to study in the city, and stayed there, as happened to many. It was said that Ben worked at a big factory, and had already reached the position of a shop manager. He had his own apartment and a brand new red car. But he didn't get married. This fact bothered the locals a lot. Women tried to match the enviable groom with their daughters and nieces. Ben's mother lamented and dreamed aloud of grandchildren. Only Ben himself was in no hurry to marry. In his own words, he was doing quite well as it was. Ben at that moment was already about 30 years old. A grown man, almost old by the standards of 15-year-old Pamela. But he was nothing like the people of that age the girl knew. First, Ben dressed fashionably and stylishly. Secondly, he joked a lot, laughed, and generally behaved relaxed and carefree. Here and with teenagers did not bother to race the ball. Many girls from the company were in love with him. Some of them talked about it directly, and some of them didn't even need to admit it. Everything became noticeable by the looks they threw at Ben. Ben liked talking to young people. That evening, the man spent the late afternoon playing ball with the teenagers. Pamela, daydreaming as always, secretly admired his deft, precise movements. Ben sometimes caught her eye, and then the girl shamefully lowered her eyes. How handsome he was, and so different from the natives. Like a man from another world. But why? How is he from another world, the city? It's a different life there. Yes, Pamela had been to the city several times. The smart, wide streets, the motley crowd of people rushing somewhere. Squares, fountains, beautiful parks. This splendor even made the girl dizzy. Life in the city was like a never-ending holiday. Ben touched Pamela a few times that evening accidentally during the game. It was as if a lightning bolt struck her at those moments. He didn't seem to notice. When it got dark, the teens went to a bench outside the neighborhood. It was their favorite gathering place. One of the boys would make a fire because it was dark here at this time. So they sat some on a bench, some on fallen trees, and some just on the grass. They told each other scary stories, discussed the events of the day, and dreamed. The atmosphere was pleasant and light. Yes, Pamela loved those hours. Then we slowly went home. Pamela was one of the first to leave. In her family, there was a strict rule to show up before midnight, even if tomorrow was a day off, and she didn't have to go to school. The girl could not disobey her parents. If she tried to do that, her mother and father would not let her out at all next time. They were strict. That night, Ben stayed with the boys. It wasn't surprising. It happened sometimes. The teenagers liked to hear him talk about his childhood. It's time to go, Pamela sighed, glancing at her wristwatch, a gift from her father. It was almost 12 o'clock at night. The friends sympathized and went back to their leisurely conversation. It was good for them to stay together around the fire, happy and carefree. Pamela didn't want to go home at all, but there was nothing to do. She walked through the deserted, dark streets of the village. It was quiet, very quiet. Only from the bench, now quite far away, the wind sometimes brought scraps of phrases and laughter. Large bright stars shone in the sky. The path was illuminated by the diffused light of the pale moon. Suddenly, Pamela heard light footsteps. Someone was catching up with her. The girl stopped and looked back. Ben was approaching her at a light trot. He was smiling at her and following her with purpose. Pamela's heart sank into her heels and her ears rattled. When she realized it, she still couldn't believe it. Now Ben will come up to me, and it will appear that there is some quite domestic reason why he is now hurrying after the young neighbor, thought the girl. You're fast, Ben said, either delighted or surprised as he approached Pamela. She lowered her eyes to the floor, embarrassed. It was a good thing it was dark outside and Ben couldn't see her flush. Otherwise, he'd have realized at once that Pamela was one of his many admirers. Are you going home already? The man asked. Pamela nodded affirmatively, still looking at the toes of her dusty sandals. Ben's proximity made her heart race, and she felt dizzy. They'd never been alone like this before, and there was no one else around. Her parents are waiting. My father scolds me if I'm home after 12, but he doesn't beat me, she said. Ben looked at Pamela with interest. No, but he swears. I see. My parents were strict too. Well, you'll grow up soon and you'll be your own boss. How old are you? Already 16. Almost, Pamela answered. Wow. Already a bride. I remember you as a little girl. And now you're so beautiful. Ben scrutinized the girl very closely, as if groping her. He liked what he saw. Pamela was both pleased and a little afraid. You are really very beautiful, said the man. Pamela flashed to the roots of her hair and smiled. These words created some kind of magic. The girl really felt strong, mature, and incredibly beautiful. She squared her shoulders and finally dared to look into Ben's eyes. In them, Pamela saw sincere admiration and also interest. Ben was openly admiring her. A wave of unexplored sensations came over the girl, and she wanted him to touch her. Ben, as if guessing her thoughts, covered her shoulder with his palm. Pamela felt a wave of goosebumps run up her spine. Shall we walk to the river? Ben said hoarsely, keeping his gaze fixed on the girl. Under that gaze, Pamela felt like a queen, a goddess, the most beautiful woman on earth. She would have followed Ben to the ends of the earth for that feeling. Never mind that her father would give her a beating for being late. It's okay, he'll find something to complain about. She'd tell her parents later that she'd been sitting around the campfire with the boys and had forgotten the time. When Ben repeated his question about the walk to the river, Pamela smiled and nodded affirmatively. That's a good girl, said the man. His affirmative answer made him the happiest man in the universe. It turned out to be very pleasant to feel your power over a man, especially a man like Ben. He took the girl's hand gently and led her toward Poplar Street. Just beyond it began the hillside on which the village was situated, and at the foot of it flowed the quiet river Fedor. In the summer, Pamela used to splash in it almost every day with her friends. But that had been in the daytime. Now it was night. The moon shone in the sky, in the light of which everything seemed so unfamiliar, so magical and mysterious. Ben and Pamela sat down on a fallen tree that served as a local shop. "You're a ravishingly beautiful girl." Ben looked at his companion without looking away. Pamela was not like the other girls. Her misdemeanors were different from the silly pranks of her friends. This Ben had realized not so long ago, and had lost his peace ever since. His words made a great impression on Pamela. She had always known she was different from her girlfriends, always felt special. And now Ben had confirmed her hunch. But was it right to sit alone with a grown man at night by the river and listen to his compliments? "Your eyes, your hair, your smile. You're perfect. I've never met anyone like you before," Ben said. "Really, I'm embarrassed," Pamela finally admitted. "I don't know what to say." And then Ben kissed her. It was so sudden that she didn't even have time to pull away. And then she didn't want to. "I'm sorry I couldn't help myself," Ben said, looking at Pamela carefully. She smiled and kissed Ben herself. She decided to let it be. She would think about whether she was doing the right thing later. For now, the girl just wanted to enjoy this magical and absolutely fantastic moment. Ben is near. He likes him. And he doesn't just like him. This grown-up, handsome man is the dream of everyone in their town, down to 10-year-old girls. He chose her. It all happened right on the beach. Pamela didn't realize it at first, and then it was too late to leave, and she didn't want to. To be honest, it hurt a little. It was good that it was over quickly. The girl hoped she had behaved properly. Ben smiled, stroked her hair, took out a pack of cigarettes and smoked. "Would you like one?" He offered one to Pamela. She shook her head negatively. Now she felt stupid and constrained. What to say, how to behave. Ben had better take the initiative again. "Are you all right? Are you okay?" he finally asked. Pamela nodded. All sorts of thoughts were running through her mind. It appeared that Ben's feelings for her were very serious. He would probably take her back to the city with him now. They would live in his apartment. It's going to take some getting used to. It probably won't be easy, but Ben will help her. He's such a strong, confident adult. You can't be afraid of anything. Pamela will be like a stone wall behind him. The main thing is that Ben loves her. He won't be as indifferent and irritable as her parents, but will surround her with love and care. The way he was looking at her. "Don't tell anyone." Ben squeezed himself out. It was like an ice-cold gush of water. The voice of the man who just half an hour ago had been staring at her with admiring eyes now sounded cold and indifferent. "I won't," Pamela replied. "That's right. And even if you did, no one would believe you." "Why not?" Pamela wondered what had happened to make Ben change so suddenly. Maybe she'd done something wrong. But the man understood the question in his own way. "Do you want to know why no one will believe you?" He grinned. "Well, think about it. Everyone in town knows that all the local girls are in love with me. And not just girls, but older ladies too. There's a lot of rumors about me around here. The ladies make up stories, one more interesting than the other. But no one believes them for a long time." Pamela nodded. Ben was right. Even if she told what had happened, no one would believe her. They'd think she was just another lovesick fool dreaming about him, sharing her fantasies. So it's best to keep quiet, or they'll laugh. Why? She did ask a question. Why, of all the girls in their company, had Ben gone after her? He must have had feelings for her. She wanted to hear again that she was special. No reason. Ben smiled. You just happened to fall into his lap. He patted Pamela on the shoulder and walked up the slope. The man climbed easily and very quickly. Pamela sat on the bank for a while, thinking about what had happened. Tears ran down her cheeks. She had already believed that happiness was near. She had even begun to think of herself as an incredible beauty. To think that in her mind Pamela had already moved to the city, to Ben's apartment. You've got to be such a fool. She wasn't special, and if she was, it was in a bad way. I don't think any of her friends could have gotten into such a mess. And Pamela? She's hanging her ears, feeling like her favorite fool. But there was no turning back the clock, and the girl made a decision that seemed to her at that moment the only right one. She forgot about what had happened, hid the events of that evening in the hidden corners of her memory. There was nothing, that's all. At home, the girl got it from her father. She patiently listened to her parents moralizing. She was not even shaken by another comparison with Emma, who had long since slept in her bed. Why take offense at the truth? Her father was right. That's just the way it was. Since then, she hadn't been drawn to the outdoors anymore. No, she hadn't become despondent or fearful. She just didn't want to go to her friends because she might meet Ben, and she didn't want that at all. It was too painful, too hard, and Pamela would feel dirty and stupid around him. After all, he knew her secret, he did, and now he saw her through completely different eyes. The parents did not notice any change in their eldest daughter. They were too busy with work, household chores, fiddling with the kids. But Emma, sensitive Emma, immediately suspected something. One day the cousin couldn't bear to ask her directly. What happened that night? I can tell something's wrong. Your face is gone. Did you have a fight with your friends? Golden untruths were spilled. You guys fight all the time, but you make up all the time. This is different. You haven't set foot outside in 2 weeks. And before that, you couldn't stay indoors for a day. So Pamela went off the deep end and told Emma everything. Even though they were not friends, but the cousin will not betray and will not run to tell everyone about what she found out. Emma was reliable and serious, though she was a bore, of course. Pamela wanted to share her misfortune with someone. Telling her sister made her feel better. The relief was instantaneous, but now Emma was frowning and thinking hard. You do realize it's a crime, she said at last. What? But what he did. He belongs in prison. You're a minor, a child, and he's a grown man who took advantage of your inexperience. Pamela didn't see her story that way. And it's not your fault, Emma continued. You're just a teenager. It's his fault. That's why he told you to keep quiet. Pamela nodded. Emma was right. Then, sitting on the riverbank, she blamed herself. She'd thought herself stupid, naive, dirty, promiscuous. But the real culprit was Ben. The realization of this simple truth made her feel better. And Pamela did something she'd never thought she'd do before she hugged Emma tightly. Thank you, she said to her sister. It was the first time she'd ever felt warm feelings for an unloved relative. She was so smart, Emma, and sensitive. Are we going to tell our parents? Emma asked. No, not at all. Pamela objected. I want to forget the whole thing as soon as possible. You realize that even though it was his fault, it would still be a shame for me if people found out. Emma nodded understandingly. Of course, she knew what her sister was worried about. Reputation is a very fragile and important thing, especially if you live in a small town. Okay, let's just forget about it. Emma nodded. But forgetting it didn't work. 3 months later, Pamela was horrified to realize she was expecting a baby. It was October. Vacation was long over. Ben had left town even earlier. After he left, Pamela breathed a sigh of relief. Still, the proximity of this man was very tense, even though he tried to stay away from her. But Pamela remembered perfectly well how her pregnant mother had walked. And of course, in her 15 years, she knew the main signs. She had them all at once. Nausea, increased appetite, a tugging sensation in her abdomen, and most importantly, a delay. She hadn't noticed it at first. It had happened to her before. But soon it became impossible to ignore the troubling symptoms. She couldn't even tell Emma about it, but she couldn't hide the shame of it either. What to do? What to do? It's a disgrace. They'll start looking for the culprit. No one will believe that Ben is the baby's father. It's useless to even say anything. This man has an impeccable reputation. He's the standard bearer for the locals. And Ben's right. A lot of the girls in town have a crush on him, and they make up stories about him from time to time, that he gave them a special look, or a hug, or a kiss. Or maybe it's all stories. But nobody believes the girls. So they'll definitely look for the culprit. And they'll probably assign it to some boy who can't justify himself. Andrew, most likely. Andrew lives near Pamela. They're kind of friends. They cheat off each other's homework. The kid sometimes carries heavy buckets home for the girl. The kids even tease them about being bride and groom over the summer. Andrew's the one who's going to get suspicious. Poor fellow, he'll have a hard time, all because of her. The mother will weep and quietly hate the daughter who brought such shame on the family. The father will probably even benefit, won't he? I don't think so. He is holding on, sometimes, and for smaller misdemeanors handed out to children slaps and often recalled those times when young people birching, considering such methods undeservedly forgotten methods of education. Life became a nightmare. Pamela would become an outcast. Other girls will be forbidden by their families to even go near her. And the child, what will happen to him? The world will be hostile to him long before he's born. And then it'll get worse. Pamela can't handle it, definitely can't handle it. This life. What's it for? At night, when everyone was fast asleep, Pamela cried quietly into her pillow so as not to wake anyone. Surprisingly, the tears brought relief. Temporary, though. The girl desperately tried to find a way out to hide the pregnancy, and then quietly give birth somewhere and leave the baby in the forest. No, it's too complicated and scary. And could she leave a defenseless baby to die? It's not his fault. Try to terminate the pregnancy herself. It seemed like a lifesaver at first. Pamela carried heavy buckets and steamed for long periods in the bath she knew from her mother, who had been pregnant several times. When her daughter was already old enough, all of this was dangerous for women in childbirth. But her baby seemed to be strong. Nothing helped, the baby stayed inside. Moreover, it was actively growing, because Pamela already had a belly, still almost imperceptible, very neat. But that was just the beginning. Pamela was not herself. At school, did not listen to teachers, did not do her homework. The girl forgot about her dream of becoming a teacher. What kind of career plans can there be when there are such problems? And Pamela is not studying now, she will have a child in her arms. She would be a single mother in front of everyone. And so young. Emma tried to rouse her cousin. She thought she was worried about the story from the summer, but Emma had no idea it was more serious than that. And Pamela hadn't told her, but she couldn't say it out loud.
One night, lying in her narrow bunk, Pamela decided that it was all too hard for her, too unbearable, and she didn't want this life at all, because there would be nothing more good. Only tears of shame, sighs, poverty, general disapproval, reproaches, even beatings of parents. Is it worth clinging to such a life? And she suddenly thought of the Albany River, flowing at the foot of the hill on which the town settled.
It was on the bank of the river that the event that had divided her life into before and after had taken place. So it would end there, Pamela decided. She got out of bed, trying not to creak the springs, grabbed from the table the long silk ribbon that Emma used to weave into her thick braid in the mornings, and slipped out of the house in a light nightgown that reached almost to her ankles. It was already October, and her arms were immediately covered with gooseflesh from the cold, but it would not be long before Pamela could feel nothing at all. She hurried toward the river, almost running, for she was afraid to change her mind. She stopped at the water's edge. She had to tie her hands with this ribbon, so that at the decisive moment she would not slacken and swim out. Pamela struggled, but managed to do it. Soon her hands were bound wrist to wrist. She could not swim out now. All that remained was to enter the river and take a few steps. The river was not wide, but it was deep enough. Children were not allowed here without their parents. A pale moon shone from the sky, about the same as then, a silent witness to Pamela's terrible secret. The girl stepped into the icy water. The river burned her feet with cold. But Pamela took another step, then another and another. And now the water was almost up to her chest. There was not much more to go. It was frightening to take those fateful steps. But Pamela had no way out, she realized it quite clearly. All she had to do was be brave enough to put all her problems behind her. I thought about that moment a lot afterward, Pamela said, resting her chin on her fist. Amanda stares at her with her eyes wide open. She realizes that the story ended well because Pamela is sitting across from her, but she still feels uneasy. I didn't see the way out, then the old woman shook her head. Indeed, she didn't. It wasn't as bad as I had pictured in my head. But I realized it much later. If it hadn't been for a happy accident, I wouldn't have realized it at all. When Pamela was up to her neck in the icy water, she heard a desperate cry from behind her. Stop, don't. Then she heard a loud splash. Someone was rushing to her rescue. The girl froze, the situation seemed too unreal. Then she slowly turned around. It was Emma, wearing a nightgown as long as Pamela's but with her father's robe over it. Emma reached her sister in no time and dragged her toward the shore. Pamela resisted. Soon both girls were on the ground, drenched, freezing, shivering. "Get home," stern Emma commanded. "You'll catch cold." Pamela nodded. Emma looked at her sister's bound wrists and sighed. Then she quickly untied the tape, took Pamela's hand, and the girls ran home. They quickly changed into dry clothes and dived into their beds, each in her own. But a moment later, Emma was under the covers with her sister. "I knew something was wrong with you a long time ago," she whispered. "I've been watching you. What are you up to? Why would you do something like that?" "You don't know anything," Pamela sighed. She was shivering, even though she was warm under the blanket. Perhaps it was fear that was beginning to realize what she had almost done. "So tell me," Emma demanded. "I won't tell anyone," Pamela said. Emma lay silent and obviously thinking about something. "You fool," she said at last. "Why didn't you consult me at once? Your problem is easily solved." And Emma told about a witch doctor from their native village, who had been curing women in their village and the surrounding villages of unwanted pregnancies all her life. And whoever went to her, even rumored to have come from the city. "She helps young girls too," Emma continued to share information. "She helps them for free, just because they have no other choice. And with the adults, Miss Hannah asks for money or groceries and she will help." Emma looked at her sister hopefully. Was there still more to come? Did Pamela really have a way out? "Of course she does," Emma said confidently. "Tomorrow, after school, I'll go to Miss Hannah's and make all the arrangements." And Emma was serious, reliable. She certainly didn't fail. The next day she had a plan ready. Emma had asked her parents to stay with her old friends in a neighboring town for the weekend, and supposedly decided to spend time with her sister. In reality, the girls were going to stay at Ms. Hannah's cabin for 24 hours. The old woman was already waiting for the girls. She warned the sisters that it would take time for Pamela to recover from the procedure. That's why Emma had made up the story with her friends. Pamela was scared of a lot of things: pain, failure, exposure. And she was ashamed in front of this stranger, Ms. Hannah. Although Emma convinced her that she had seen all sorts of things in her life and treated everything with understanding. Even pities young girls in trouble. That's why she helps them for free. Ms. Hannah lived in a small house on the edge of town. A cozy, clean, bright house. Pamela even smiled when she saw it. She had imagined the witch's lair quite differently: dark rooms with old-fashioned windows, bundles of dried herbs hanging everywhere, a skinny black cat with evil eyes. There was a cat, but it was ginger, fat, fluffy, indifferent. Miss Hannah received the girls cordially, gave them tea, asked Pamela about her trouble. She told Pamela everything without a secret, because she knew that this old woman would understand her and would not condemn her. Ms. Hannah nodded silently, shook her head, and whispered something cursing to Ben under her breath. The procedure itself took place in a separate room. Pamela had to lie down on a special table, hard, long, cold. It was painful. Despite the fact that Miss Hannah had given the young patient some kind of potion beforehand, Pamela bravely endured. She tried not to show that she felt anything at all. But at one moment the pain became so unbearable that the girl lost consciousness, simply blacked out, fell into darkness. When she came to, she saw Miss Hannah and Emma leaning over her. She herself was already lying on the soft bed. Both had worried faces. "Well, thank goodness you're awake," Miss Hannah exhaled. "I thought it was over." "Is it over?" Pamela asked in a weak voice. She felt pain in every cell of her body, not as sharp as the pain on the table, but still. "Yes, it's all over, Ms. Hannah replied. "The baby was clingy. I could barely manage it. I've never seen such a stubborn one. He almost took you with him. But you're young and strong. You did it." Pamela was frightened. She was afraid Ms. Hannah would say it was all for nothing, that the pregnancy was still developing. "I don't know if you'll be able to be a mother now that you're older, Ms. Hannah said. "I don't think so. The procedure was too hard, not without consequences. It happens." Pamela breathed out a sigh of relief. What did it matter what happened years from now? The main thing was that everything was fine now. She could finish school and go to college. All roads were open to her again. Pamela then felt happy and free. Many years had passed. Pamela, as she dreamed, became a teacher of physics and math. She finished school in this city, studied at the institute. The girl tried not to remember what happened to her then. But the story, of course, left an imprint on Pamela's behavior. She became more experienced, wiser, more cautious, and no longer allowed dangerous situations in her life, avoided guys. Pamela did not trust men, and even planned to live her whole life alone and independent. Other girls aspired to marry, dreamed of family life. Pamela was quite satisfied with a bachelor existence. Love did not pass her by. It happened when Pamela worked at school. Once in the gym needed repair. A construction crew arrived. It was led by a tall, russet-haired, blue-eyed guy. When Pamela first saw Adam, her heart gave a sweet shiver. She had forbidden herself to feel anything at first, but it was beyond her strength. All the more so when Adam began to pay the pretty young teacher some attention. This time everything was different, beautiful, romantic, and sincere. Adam asked Pamela out on dates and always greeted her with a bouquet of beautiful flowers. They sat in cafes, went to the movies and theaters, just walked around the city, talked a lot, got to know each other closer and closer, and closer. And at one fine moment, Pamela realized that she couldn't live without Adam. Happiness. He felt the same way. The young people got married. Pamela moved into her husband's apartment, which he got from work. The couple were happy. They lived soul to soul, but they couldn't have a baby. And I wanted one so badly, Pamela sighed. Of course, I knew what was wrong. Hannah had warned me that there might be problems with children in the future. But at the time, having just gotten rid of the problem, it didn't bother me at all. A sad Pamela told her husband all about it. She didn't want there to be any secrets between them. Pamela was mentally prepared for Adam to leave her. Who would want someone like that? But he only hugged her tightly and told her it wasn't important. Adam took pity on me, Pamela continued. He, like Emma, blamed Ben for everything. So we'll have to live alone, without children. That's all right, that's what happens. And they lived, enjoying each other, traveling, working, meeting friends, visiting interesting places, reading, sharing impressions of what they had read, watching TV together, supported each other in everything. Adam and Pamela became the closest and dearest people. Wonderful, simply golden years, full of love, acceptance, and mutual understanding. For Pamela, they were a reward, payback for a cold and unhappy childhood. But time takes its toll. Pamela and Adam grew old. His heart problems have worsened since his retirement. And 2 years ago, Pamela was left alone. Adam had a heart attack right in front of his terrified wife. She took the loss hard and still hasn't fully recovered. It's only now that he's not around that I realize what loneliness is. Pamela shook her head. It's when there's no one to talk to, no one to care about. It's hard, Amanda nodded sympathetically. She temporarily forgot about her own problem. What kind of problem is it anyway? I'll tell my parents. They'll be grumpy, but they'll figure something out. There will be a way out. This is not the old days, when the family of a girl who got into such a situation lay in indelible shame. The XXI century is here, and this does not happen. Although, of course, it will not be easy. The apartment is small, and there's a new baby. Do you know what I was thinking? Pamela suddenly smiled. What if you came to my place and rented a room from me? Not for money, but for domestic help. I'm old, weak. Sometimes it's hard even to go to the store, and here I have a living soul near me. I don't know, Amanda laughed, realizing at once that it was an ideal option. But it's not profitable for you. The room could be rented out for a lot of money. I don't have that kind of money, and all you're offering to do is help you with the household chores. It's an unequal exchange. Take it. Pamela smiled warmly. And you feel good, and I'm not so lonely. And when the baby is born, I'll help you with the baby. I'd love to. I've never had children of my own. So I just love babies, Pamela continued. How many relatives have you swaddled? It's exhausting. And you're going to need some help, too. Amanda still couldn't believe her good fortune. It was the perfect solution to the problem. A real solution. The old woman is really lonely, and Amanda needs support and participation. They would save each other. Thank you. Tears came to her eyes. The future is finally becoming clearer. Bright rainbow colors. And faith. For the first time, I felt the joy of being a mom soon. I now have a plan, I have support, which means everything will be okay. The highway leading through the wooded area from the village to the main highway was in fairly good condition. But John, who who was sitting behind the wheel, didn't press the gas. Even though the bends of the road were not too steep, but he, as an experienced driver, was well aware of how sad the consequences of a sudden appearance of a wild animal in front of the car could be. So the man, having taken the passenger to a cozy remote village, leisurely returned to the city. Besides, it was quite possible to finish the work for today. After all, this order went surprisingly smoothly and brought excellent tips. The amount is quite comparable to the cost of the trip. The elderly passenger, who was helped into the car by a restless young girl, turned out to be very pleasant. At first, the lady, to whom the word old lady did not fit, was reading something on her smartphone, and then she began to look thoughtfully at the landscape outside the cab window. For fun, John sometimes tried to guess the occupation of the person he was helping to comfortably travel by car. Of course, such distractions from the road did not happen too often. But when the situation permitted, the driver allowed himself an innocent amusement and was often right in his guesses. And today he was sneaking glances at the passenger. He began to speculate. Her clothes were nice and fairly new. Her hair was impeccable, even after the woman had pulled back the hood of her light cloak. Understated makeup, some kind of peculiarly straight posture. The woman noticed that the cabbie was looking at her and gave him a direct stare, as if looking straight into his soul. John felt uncomfortable and hastily clarified. "Should I change the temperature or leave it at that?" The passenger's well-practiced voice was soft, but clear and coherent. "Thank you. Everything is fine." John was wondering who this woman with a royal posture, towering in the back seat of his car. He also thought that the passenger, like his mother, had devoted many years of her life to the difficult work of a teacher. Except that the deference and fidgetiness shown by the young escort hinted at a higher status. Maybe the old lady had advanced in her career to the position of school principal, or had been a famous actress or singer in the past. However, the look of this passenger seemed to reject the possibility of extraneous conversations in advance. From the very beginning, John thought that the passenger was a retired judge. He had already had encounters with people of this profession in his life, and frankly speaking, he disliked them. They decide the fates, often without delving into the circumstances of cases, acting quite unjustly. And all this under cover of numbers of articles of laws. Ugh, they think they're gods. When the lady first came out of the entrance, she seemed arrogant, and the driver even felt something very close to inexplicable dislike. Very soon, however, John's impression changed to the opposite. Observing the passenger's behavior, he realized that she was sharply different from those to whom everyone around him is eternally indebted. The woman gently calmed down the girl who was fussily helping her, who had managed to drop one of the bulky bags and was loudly lamenting about the forgotten item. The lady said a polite hello to him, to what a far cry from her customers, and reassuringly wished the remaining assistant a good end to her day. It would seem that these were trifles, manifestations of elementary courtesy and nothing more. For some reason, however, these details pleased John. Here was the end of the trip, which had passed almost in complete silence, when the car had already entered the village. As the car approached its destination, the man saw a radiant smile flicker across the passenger's lips and instantly transform her face. The car passed a boy walking along the curb with a shaggy dog on a leash. This couple, obviously pleased with each other's company, was apparently either familiar to the lady or evoked some pleasant memories. Having parked the car in the specified place, John helped the passenger to take things out of the trunk and wanted to offer to carry them. But a very young boy, running from the gate, beat him to it. After giving the cabbie a hostile look, the young man began to pull out the bags. The lady handed John a few bills and thanked him from the bottom of her heart. "Thank you, a wonderful trip. You drive the car perfectly, as if you could feel it like a living thing. Goodbye." Honesty prevented John from taking the outstretched money, he reported. "Actually, your trip has already been paid for non-cash, so have a good day." The woman smiled. "I know it's for you personally. Dispose of it as you see fit. Go home early, get some rest or something. While I was driving, I read about the cute custom of paying for the next person in the coffee shop. It's called a suspended coffee." Meanwhile, the nimble young man, who was still casting suspicious glances at John, carried all of his belongings and respectfully extended his hand to help me up the steps. The passenger once more offered to the driver. Take it. It would really be fun if you could help someone in need to get where they need to go. Good luck to you." John did not refuse and thanked the woman, said goodbye and drove off. Dusk was just beginning to fall, and the road was a little faded after the recent rain. There was no point in driving with the gas pedal to the floor. No one was waiting for him at the rented apartment. His mother lived in another city and flatly refused to move. It was as if she had put down roots at her job at the school, an institution familiar to every corner, which for several years had been threatened to be overhauled. But the volume of this event was so large that even during the long summer vacation was not to cope. So it turned out that in some offices his mother literally knew every nail in the face. After all, she, together with colleagues and parents, many of whom had to teach, repaired classrooms and corridors, not relying on the generosity of the budget. Her mother had long hinted to her only son that he should move in with her, but John was ashamed to return to his homeland. It seemed to him that the ubiquitous and chatty gossipers would teach and remind him of what he himself had tried so hard to forget. Really, how could one be proud of such a sad experience? Especially when your mother had spent her whole life teaching her children goodness, light, eternal values. These thoughts, which again, uninvited, appeared in his head, made the cab driver's mood worsen. After all, he had not gone to prison because he was a criminal. He hadn't hurt anyone. It was only John's fault for being too gullible that he had to do the time. How proud his mother, father, and wife had been when he'd managed to get a job in a bank after graduation. And how much grief had this supposed good fortune brought to their family. John diligently went into all the nuances of the work and acted strictly according to the job description, but did not notice how he was the only suspect in the organization of a large-scale crime. The cunning manager managed to twist the ongoing investigation in such a way as to get away with it, and John was unable to prove his innocence. The lawyer seemed to try to build a defense, but without success. The father died of a heart attack shortly after learning of the verdict for his only son. His adoring wife, Jennifer, decided to divorce him. Only his mother waited for him and fought for her son to leave the prison walls as soon as possible. After his release, of course, John had a hard time. He didn't get a good job, so he had to make do with casual labor, and then decided that the only more or less reliable hope for stability and financial independence is his ability to drive a car. Thanks to his father, who taught him the wisdom of driving and car care starting almost from kindergarten, having issued a new license to replace the expired ones. The unlucky former bank clerk and ex-convict became a cab driver. Relationships with women somehow did not add up, and in his 30s the man became an inveterate bachelor. To the prospective grooms he could not be attributed, because the wealth of John, of course, could not boast. In addition, purposefully looking for his happiness, he just did not want to. Long betrayal of his wife was still an unhealed wound. Small love affairs ended in separation, and John was not too broken about his loneliness. His mother, rapidly losing her health, was the only person he lived for now. John sent her money regularly, and in the fall he came to help her buy vegetables for the winter. It had only been a couple weeks. How he had parted from his mother after another brief encounter, but the man missed her desperately again. How good and peaceful he felt when she stroked his head as if in passing, or carefully adjusted his blanket when he was on the verge of sleep. But John couldn't afford to stay in his hometown and have everyone pointing fingers at his mother or himself. He was afraid he would lose his temper, punish the gossipers and abusers, and go back to prison. No, it was better to come for a few days, and then hide from gossip and worried looks in a metropolis alien in spirit and mood, where no one is interested in anyone. Here, even about neighbors on the landing is not known. And John was happy and completely satisfied with it. And having caught up with his memories, the cab driver tried to switch to other thoughts, but there were practically no positive ones among them. The leisurely return to the city was a good time to think about the incidents that had happened to him during the years he had been working in the cab. Not all the passengers had been as complacent as the elegant lady who had left the cab a short time ago. They had tried to rip John off, and they had tried to run away from the car without paying. The stretch of road through the woods had long since ended. A little more, and ahead would appear a series of dacha settlements, which were especially picturesque in spring and early fall. Almost immediately after them, about 15 minutes away, the house where John had rented an apartment would appear. Not so long ago, the traffic had been incredibly heavy, but now that the harvest was almost over and only a few late apples were hanging, the cottages looked abandoned and deserted, and the road was almost empty. John wanted to pass through these not very cheerful places. But suddenly, as he passed one of the stops, he noticed a figure lying on a bench. Nearby was a wheeled cart, a sure sign of experienced dacha dwellers, who, like industrious ants, haul the crops from their dachas to their city apartments. The cab driver did not consider himself an evil person, but he caught himself thinking that the first thing he wanted to do was to press the gas pedal. However, having figured out that the season, when the municipality runs public transport to dachas, was already over, he realized that a stranger could not hope for a shuttle bus to arrive. John carefully slowed down, parked the car on the side of the road to find out maybe the man became ill, needs medical help, or just needs to get to the city. After all, no one was waiting for him at home, and the words of a recent passenger suddenly popped into his head. John got out of the car, stretched his legs a little, and approached the bench. For a second, the cab driver felt uneasy, because the man didn't react to the knocking of the door or the sound of footsteps. "Hey, buddy," John called out. "Are you all right? Alive or what?" The body moved. Then the man turned, sat down on the bench, and looked at the cab driver. John saw before him not a man at all, but a rather young girl, and he looked at the stranger with surprise. Her clothes were even worse than those which country people wear to visit their plots, and were more like those of a scarecrow. The old-fashioned jacket, which was fashionable to wear 30 years ago, was clearly too big for the girl, and the knitted hat pulled low on her forehead looked visibly shabby. The image was completed by the sneakers, which had obviously seen a lot in their lifetime. All in all, the stranger looked like a vagrant or a beggar, like those who sat at church gates. John was in no hurry to draw conclusions. There was no telling what might have happened to the girl's normal clothes. Maybe she had to wear things exiled to the country estate due to some insurmountable circumstances. There was no odor of alcohol. Yes, and in general, the stranger had too clear a look. Trying not to frighten her, John began to speak soothingly. "I don't know if you know or not, but there will definitely be no dacha bus. I listen to the radio all the time, and they said on the news that the season is over. So if you are going to the city, I can give you a ride." In the eyes of the stranger was clearly visible fear, and at the same time there was a desire to be in a cozier place than this wind-blown stop. And in a hoarse voice the girl confessed, "It would be nice to get to town, but I have money only for a loaf of bread." "Don't you have money to pay for it?" John could not help but laugh at the amazing coincidence, and hurried to explain the situation to the stranger, who seemed about to run away. "By happy coincidence, it turned out that your trip has already been paid for by my recent passenger. Especially since I'm going into town myself. It's not all about the money. Sometimes it's good to show a little humanity. Why don't I give you a ride on the way?" The girl's look was still distrustful, and the man, who himself wanted to get home as soon as possible, and not to stand on the highway, experiencing the gusts of the rising wind, had to hurry her. "Here, decide whether you're going or not. I'm not going to hurt you in any way, by the way. If you believe me, let's get in the car and go." "Well, there's no judgment. Maybe some other kind driver will feel sorry for you." The stranger rose abruptly from the bench, picked up her wheeled bag, and answered the cab driver. "I'm ready." On the way to the car, John noticed that his companion was obviously cold, although maybe she was shivering from excitement. The cab driver didn't bother to find out why, but simply turned on the heater and concentrated on the road. The passenger, who sat in the front seat next to him, placed her bag in her legs, fastened her seatbelt, and seemed to disconnect from reality. John didn't talk to the stranger, and she didn't talk either. Only when the car was almost entering the city, the man specified, "Where should I take you?" The girl shuddered, as if breaking out of a stupor, and after a few seconds, clearly thinking something over, answered, "Now there will be a 24-hour stall and I can go out. Or, if it's not too much trouble, turn right, and I'll be there in 2 blocks. John was a little confused about the destination. As far as he understood his passenger, she was going to one of the most disadvantaged neighborhoods. A neighborhood built up with temporary housing for workers who were erecting a series of factories. It had lasted much longer than planned in the city, but was now living out its last days. Most of the residents were happy to leave the barracks with minimal amenities. Judging by the numerous houses with lit roofs, the centralized heating had already been turned off, and the dwellings had gone to people who simply had nowhere else to live. The residents of this neighborhood almost never used cab services, unless they were plotting to take the proceeds. Strangely enough, the girl didn't look like a criminal or socially depressed. Literate speech, noticeable even by short lines, Clearly, practiced observance of traffic rules and manners in general indicated that the passenger was hardly a native of this suburb. Having decided that if to do good, then not half, John did not slow down at the stall, as if he had been transported by time machine from the dashing 90s, when the country was in ruins and the cruel laws of survival came into force. Obeying the girl's instructions, he took her where she asked. There was no limit to the man's surprise. The place where his passenger needed to go was not even a house, but actually a ruin. A woman, whose clothes looked even worse than John's, came out of a leaning door, apparently having heard the noise of the car. The girl, having quickly uttered words of gratitude, slipped out of the interior of the car. The cab driver was ready to start from his seat, when he suddenly saw the woman slapping the cheeks of his recent passenger. Then the inhabitant of the dilapidated building began to pull her bag with one hand, without stopping slapping her. The girl did not make any attempt to actively defend herself and simply hid back, but did not let go of her burden. Sighing and mentally cursing himself, John got out of the car, taking his trusty tire iron with him, and went to rescue the girl. She didn't even react to the appearance of the voluntary defender. But the woman with a saintly beaten face began pouring profanity on the man, generously inserting into her swear words the slang typical of people who had been in places not so remote. This was the first time John was glad that he himself had passed the test of prison time, and he quickly explained to the fierce woman that she was wrong. The man asked the girl, "Are you staying here, or are we going farther?" The young stranger angrily snatched her bag from her hands and walked toward the car. John followed her but turned around several times, expecting anything. Fortunately, the precautions were unnecessary, and soon the cab quietly left the scene of the recent ugly scene. The girl did not cry, but sat tense and sometimes shuddered when the car bounced on the bumps, which were plentiful on the outskirts of the city. Silently handing the passenger wet wipes, John concentrated on the road and then offered, "There's a social shelter on the other side of town. They help people in difficult circumstances. If you want, I'll take you there. They have strict rules, but every point is absolutely fair. You can't bring any booze with you. That's the most important condition. And they'll make you work too, but you don't have to pay any money. Contributions are only on a voluntary basis, and they can be made even after a difficult period of life left behind. They helped me out a lot in my time. If it hadn't been for their support, it is unlikely that I would have been able to quickly get out of the hole in my life." The female passenger whispered so quietly that John didn't hear and asked again, "I'm sorry, I didn't understand." The girl repeated, but louder, "Are you tired? So don't think about me. Just give me the address of this shelter and I'll get there myself." John looked at his watch and began to think out loud. "Of course, I could invite you to my place without a second thought. But I live in a rented apartment, and the landlord is strictly forbidden to bring strangers without his prior approval. Look, why don't I drive you to the shelter? There's always someone on duty there, and if you're lucky, someone you know. They'll help you get checked in quickly. Do you have your papers?" The girl nodded in time with the doggy on the dashboard, and realizing that the cab driver's kindness had long since gone beyond the simple desire to give a hitchhiker a ride, began to thank him confusedly. Interrupting the flow of thanks, John asked, "Listen, what's your name, Emily?" "Emily," the passenger whispered. The cabbie hummed at this unexpected correction and introduced himself in response. "Well, I'm John. That's how we met. So pardon the imposition, Emily. But I'm going to ask you a question that's been bothering me. What are some of the sins you just got slapped for?" Even in the encroaching darkness, somewhat dispersed by the glowing instruments, it was noticeable in the parlor how embarrassed the girl was. "That's a long explanation. And to make a long story short, I didn't bring any money or groceries. And in general, I left with my documents, which is strictly forbidden. I myself do not understand why I went back there. I don't know why I went back there." John asked again, "Is that your home there? Or is it some kind of voluntary slavery?" The cab driver didn't wait for Emily's answer, because the girl cried, interrupting the silence with sobs. John parked outside the store and turned to the passenger. "You sit here. I'll go get some groceries. I don't feel comfortable driving empty-handed. Help is always welcome there." Emily didn't even seem to notice John's words. He returned, loaded the bags into the back seat, and the girl had already calmed down and even apologized. "I'm sorry. I'm sorry. My nerves are a little frayed." The cab driver nodded, letting her know that he understood, And when he had already driven Emily to a well-known shelter, he dared to bother her again. Everyone made it. John took his bag, and they went to get Emily settled in for the night. Afterward, she would decide where she wanted to go. To John's delight, a good friend of his was on duty at the shelter that evening. The old woman opened the door and greeted his former ward cordially. "Oh, John, it's been a long time. What brings you to our land, still working as a driver? Don't you get bored? Come in, darling. I've just made some tea. Take your time. Sit with the old lady, tell her the news." John, putting the bags on the floor, hugged the woman who had always treated him in a motherly way. And she, still talking, noticed a crying girl behind the ajar door and stretched out. "Yes, I see you didn't just drop in to see me or bring some goodies. Come on in and tell me what happened." The cab driver introduced his passenger to the shelter attendant on duty. "Here's our Deborah. I was lucky, although everyone here is a wonderful person. But I'll tell you in confidence that Deborah is the best. There are no unsolvable problems for her, and she always finds wise words to support and comfort. Deborah. And this is Emily. I only met her today, but as far as I can tell, she clearly needs a roof over her head. At least for tonight. And of course your advice, as always, will come in handy." The attendant led the guests into the kitchen, and as she sorted through the packages, she had time to run errands for John and Emily. "Emily, if there are any papers, let me see them. And you, John, take a set of clothes for Emily from the pantry. We keep all sorts of things, and show her where she can wash up. And if she wants to, she can take a shower too." While Emily cleaned herself up, the nimble Deborah set the table with John's help, persuading her former ward to eat dinner as well, scolding him unmercifully. "I know you probably haven't had anything hot but coffee today. I poured both Emily and you some delicious chicken soup with homemade noodles. Let's sit down and have a quiet dinner. Then we can talk. It won't do any good on an empty stomach." Emily, washed and changed, looked even more youthful than she had in the tramp's clothes, which Deborah, with her permission, had already taken to the small room equipped as a laundry. Her passport said she was only 18, but she didn't look it. The overly curious residents of the orphanage who stopped by the kitchen to see who had come to visit so late, Deborah gently sent them to their rooms. "I realize there's not much entertainment here, but we're not here for a performance. You'll get to know each other tomorrow." The woman was obeyed unquestioningly, and she continued to treat John and Emily. When the guests had had enough, Deborah tactfully clarified. "Emily, I realize you don't feel too comfortable right now. You think I'm going to interrogate you. But trust me, you have the right to tell me as much as you feel you need to. If you don't want to say anything at all, that's okay. Sometimes it takes time." But it seemed as if the girl wanted to say something herself. She began her story by thanking John. "Thank you for picking me up at the bus stop. And then when they saw the ugly scene, they didn't leave me to my fate. They brought me here, where I finally made myself look like a human being. I decided at the bus stop that I'd rather be here than go on living this pointless life. And then you showed up, like an angel, even though I didn't deserve to be saved. I came to this cottage for a reason. I thought there was no one there anymore. And I was caught. It's good that the women who detained me didn't call the police and didn't beat me up. They just let me go. They even gave me some apples, but strictly ordered me not to appear in that dacha village again. So I lay down on the bench, feeling ashamed and bitter. Although the weather was not hot, I was terribly embarrassed about the fate I had arranged for myself." Deborah, who had listened to hundreds of confessions, was silent, realizing that the girl was preparing to tell the details of how she had become homeless. John decided to be supportive with words and encouragement. "So you're still very young, Emily. There's time to make things right, however." The cab driver's words had an unexpected effect on Emily. The girl cried, but without hysterical sobs. Then she explained to John and Deborah, who had arrived. "I have already regretted 1,000 times the things I did 6 months ago. It all started when I met Michael. A funny, charming guy, I thought at the time. After classes at the institute, he met me while we were walking home. So entertained me that my stomach ached from laughter. Then I fell head over heels in love with him and started skipping school. What kind of classes could there be when spring was raging and the guy was asking for meetings? Of course. My parents strongly discouraged me from hanging out with Michael. My father said that my favorite is some kind of murky, asked me to give time to collect all available information about Michael and even a little more. My mom begged to listen to my dad's idea too. saying that she had a bad feeling about it and that my obsession with Michael worried her. She hinted and even said outright that he was an Alfonso and would break my heart by betraying me. But I only believed the one I loved. Michael was so convincing that he loved me. Of course I believed him. Not my parents' suspicions. Some usurer of doubts appeared, but I was quick to deal with him. In response to my direct question as to whether his interest was self-serving, Michael even took offense and disappeared for a few days. I was so hurt that once he reappeared, apologized, and started kissing me. I fell in love with him even more. My lover and I started meeting secretly because he lived in a hostel and there was nowhere to bring me. About meeting Michael's parents was out of the question. They lived in another state, and my lover planned that when he had a vacation, we would go to them together, in my hometown. I was terrified to appear with Michael in crowded places, so that my parents would not find out about the continuation of the relationship. Amelia, a longtime friend of my mom's, was so supportive. She even gave me her own apartment to go out with Michael, said I was old enough to make my own life. I couldn't keep the secret about the meetings for long. One day I came home, and it was announced to me in an ultimatum form that this connection must necessarily be cut off. I did not give in. The quarrels in our apartment grew more and more frequent, and it smelled of sedatives. I showed up there less and less often, though. Sometimes only to sleep over if Amelia's apartment was occupied. My mom was giving me a hard time. Dad threatened to withdraw his financial support. And I was already making plans for married life with the man I loved. I was convinced that I was old enough to have a serious conversation with my foster parents, and it was time to figure things out and live my life. How betrayed and hurt I felt. How so? Because not only had my parents lied to me all my life, but they also wanted to take away my love now. You bought me like a toy and kept me away from my own mother, playing the role of benefactors. I don't know what I was thinking, but it was clearly not in my right mind that I came to the apartment where my childhood had passed. And instead of having a calm conversation, I began to reproach those whom I thought were my parents and curse them for their lies. Emily cried quietly, repeating that she had always wished me well. John sat with a defeated look on his face, then left for the kitchen, probably to avoid listening to my accusations. The woman who had taken me to daycare, treated me, taught me lessons, had tears rolling down her cheeks, but those incessant drops didn't touch me at all. I managed to get my real mother Deborah's address from her. John came back with 2 glasses filled with a stinking liquid that smelled like valerian, and almost forced us to drink the sedative. I continued to play the accuser. You're used to buying everything, but money doesn't make you gods who are allowed to decide everything for others, I shouted. My mom did something to calm me down. Or maybe it was the sedative. I turned around and went to my room. That was the last night I saw the people who had raised me. During the night, I packed up some of my things, all the jewelry I'd given them, and, in what I now repent, I took the money. My parents never hid their savings from me, they trusted me. And then I even justified myself that it was a moral compensation to me for their lies and interference in my relationship with Michael. Without even leaving a note, I left the apartment. I had 2 goals: to find my birth mom, Deborah, and start a happy new life with her, my brothers and sisters I had been separated from, and of course with Michael. I was not even frightened by the prospect of moving to another city, because my beloved will find work everywhere. I believed that, and I didn't feel bad about dropping out of school. Why would I need a diploma if I had to sacrifice my love for it? I was sure that my lover would support me, so I called him. We met. I confusedly explained what had happened. I invited him to come with me to search for my biological mom, to support me in a difficult moment. But he apologized, saying he had to be at work in the next few days. Michael comforted me, promising to stay in touch. We also agreed that he would find us a rented apartment with the money from my parents' inheritance. I left a little for the road, and the rest of the rather large sum, and a bag of jewelry I gave Michael, so as not to lose it. After a heated embrace, we parted. It's long to tell how much and by what means I had to search for my birth mom. Fortunately, I had money and rented a room in a nice cozy hostel. I called Michael every day. He sent me photos of apartments for approval. But our conversations were short, a few minutes each. My favorite explained all the hard work and careful selection of our future family nest, and I, tired of fruitless searches, was not the best conversationalist. My biological mom, as it turned out, had managed to change her place of residence several times. And of course, I noticed that the neighborhood was becoming less and less prestigious with each move. After about a week of searching, I reached the dilapidated house where you, John, drove me today. I had accomplished my goal and finally met my birth mom. Strangely enough, she recognized me as soon as I opened the door. "My golden one," she screamed. "My baby girl, my darling. I've been waiting for you to find me someday." We cried for a long time, sitting in each other's arms, unable to talk. Mom confessed that she considered parting with me the worst mistake, for which she had to pay a heavy price. She didn't go into details, but it was obvious that she was addicted to alcohol. When my mom admitted that of my 2 brothers and 3 sisters, none of them were in touch with her. I, of course, immediately suggested that she move in with me. Mom agreed. In high spirits, I told Michael about the long-awaited meeting and asked him to find a bigger apartment. At first, he seemed to share my emotions, congratulated me, rejoiced, but the next day he stopped contacting me. It was impossible to call him, and I was worried that something had happened to him. I couldn't find a place for myself. I didn't have any close, trusted friends, so I called Amelia. Instead of support and help, I received recriminations and accusations. A friend of my foster mom's told me that tragedy had struck. The man I thought was my father had suffered a stroke and was in the hospital. Amelia recounted the circumstances that led to his stroke. It turned out he had gone to the police to file a theft report against me, but hit a tree on the way. My foster dad suddenly felt sick. Fortunately, the speed was low and there were no other casualties. Amelia said that her friend, my foster mother, called me an ungrateful creature, a creep who was the reason my entire well-being was ruined. I didn't have the strength to object. In my heart, I knew that all the insults were well-deserved. I asked Amelia for the number of the hospital, but she strictly forbade me not only to come to town, but even to contact my foster mother. She claimed it would only make things worse and could take away her friend's health as well. Amelia begged me not to call the foster mom, lest she be sent to a hospital bed or, God forbid, to the next world. Hearing me sobbing into the phone, Amelia softened and promised to let me know when the situation was more favorable. She also agreed to go to Michael's dorm to see if anything bad had happened to him. I waited impatiently for news. Soon I heard from Amelia that Michael had been offered a lucrative 6-month shift, and he had left, leaving some of his belongings behind. I calmed down a little, so my lover was fine, and anything could have happened to the phone. I'd called Amelia about once a month for 6 months now, but she asked me not to disturb the people I'd disappointed. I asked her to tell her on my behalf that I was sorry, but she said I was not yet forgiven. I asked if I could come, and she said it was too soon. The foster father needs to get stronger and the mother needs to calm down. Michael still hasn't contacted me, even though by my reckoning he should be back by now. I have to admit, I'm beginning to suspect that he won't even show up. More and more often I think that he turned out to be a fraud and, having embezzled the money and jewelry received from me, just decided to hide. Not only that, but my relationship with my biological mother began to deteriorate as I ran out of money. I sold my smartphone and bought a simple phone instead. But of course that's not enough. The biological mother works unofficially. Or rather, she's trying to work until she gets fired for absenteeism. She set me up to sort of support her. In addition, there were fights because her roommate started to show interest in me. So she tries to see me less at home. And today she sent me to the cottage to clean up the mess. The fact that I came by car made my mother mad, and John witnessed the ugly scene. She slapped me in the face. When she heard that I hadn't managed to bring anything from the cottage, she started to take away my bag. I had my cell phone and passport in it, so I clutched at the handle like a drowning man clutching at straws. These things were my last hope that everything would work out, my last link to the people who were really close to me. It's a good thing you, John, didn't go and get me out of there. I myself realize how wrong I was to take money from people from whom I saw only kindness and care. It turns out they were right about Michael, too. I wish I'd believed them and hurt them by doing that. It was her own fault. But the punishment the foster parents received for their kindness was completely unfair. If Emily had been a little braver, she would have gotten down on her knees and started apologizing. But she feared that they really had cut her out of their lives and didn't want to see her. Even more, she feared that her father would be made worse by her appearance, especially since she couldn't pay back the money she'd taken. Emily was silent. Michael didn't say anything either. Deborah shook her head and didn't beat around the bush. The girl had made a mess of things. But I'm not judging. A young crush can sometimes push even much wiser people into rash behavior. You know, Michael, Emily is absolutely right to apologize to the people who raised her. I understand that she fears their reaction, but it's better to apologize in person to their faces than to cowardly make excuses through an outsider, even a close family friend. Torturing people like this and living in uncertainty herself is wrong. Her biological mom, as I understand it, needs to be rescued from alcoholism. But unfortunately, you can't help someone who doesn't want to. Forcing healthcare against one's will is a hopeless endeavor. There's flavored tea in the cup. Deborah turned to Michael. Michael, are you on shift tomorrow? Realizing what the orphanage attendant was getting at, the cab driver completed her thought by suggesting Emily. How would you feel about going to your town tomorrow morning without putting it off? Especially since tomorrow will be Saturday. Do you think your parents will be home? The confused girl couldn't believe that right now she had a chance to try to correct the mistake she had made. So she nodded silently. Deborah smiled contentedly. Well, if you have to travel to another city, then you should have time to rest. So Emily, I'll organize a sleeping place for you. Michael, I suggest you stay too. There's a spot on the couch in the break room. Or do you want to go back to your place? Michael, after some thought, decided to stay at the shelter. We'll leave from here tomorrow morning. I don't see the point of driving back and forth across town. So, Deborah, I'll take you up on your kind offer. It seemed to Emily like a miracle she'd given up believing in. The desk clerk put the girl up for the night and went back to Michael. As much as he wanted to talk more with the wise Deborah, she firmly ordered him to rest. Michael, you know I'd love to talk to you, but you have to be on the road tomorrow. If you could just be supportive of the girl. Well, the fact that she trusted a scumbag man, that's every other girl in the orphanage. But the story about the money she took from her foster parents is a little more serious. It's a good thing Emily didn't shy away from it. Although it would have been easier to keep quiet and create an all-white and fluffy image. So she's a good girl. You should watch her. Michael just waved her off. Oh, Deborah, do you all need someone to team up with? I have a history of prison. You know that. And we're almost 12 years apart in age. No, Emily's beautiful, but she's not for me. And after my divorce from my wife, I can't find the strength to trust a woman again. Duty blushed with indignation and began to jokingly reprimand the former ward. How did you generalize the entire female sex? Don't take offense. And in general, go and rest. Tomorrow morning, load into the car and go. Michael had no choice but to obey. In the morning, Emily was incredibly nervous, and only by a miracle managed not to spill hot tea served for breakfast. Poor thing's nervous, Michael thought. But he didn't know how to support his casual companion who had come into his life so abruptly. John realized that he did not feel any romantic feelings for the girl who frankly told about his ridiculous love. But for some reason, he really wanted to help her. He called the dispatcher to explain that he wouldn't be coming into work. After a quick tidy-up and a delicious breakfast, he took Emily to her foster parents. The cab driver didn't bother the girl with conversation and only asked if she would mind a softly turned-on radio. The hour-and-a-half ride passed in silence, which reflected Emily's tension. John could see that she was questioning the appropriateness of her intended visit. Emily, if it's appropriate, I could go with you, he suggested. As a sort of moral support. I promise I'll be there for you. There was a glint of hope in the girl's eyes. Of course, I'm an adult, and I have to take responsibility for my own misbehavior. But I'd appreciate it if you'd come with me. It's not that I need your help to defend myself against the just anger of Mom and Dad. It's just that I'm afraid, as Amelia warned me, that one of them will get hurt. In that case, your help could be invaluable. A quick trip to the hospital if necessary. John saw Emily's hand shake as she pressed the intercom button. She probably would have run away if he hadn't been there when she heard a woman's voice on the speaker. Who? The girl answered as if all her strength had left her. Mom, it's me, Emily. Emily, my girl. The voice in the speaker was ringing with joy. Come in quickly. The door opened, and John followed Emily, who did not wait for the elevator, and jumping over the steps, strove to get to the people whom, it seems, did not cease to love. On the platform of the 4th floor, the girl literally ran into the arms of a crying woman and a man carefully supporting her by the waist. For a few seconds, only separate words were heard: Emily, Mommy, Daddy. in various variations. John felt awkward, but then a man who appeared to be Emily's adoptive father caught his eye. Coming to his senses, he called everyone into the apartment. "Ladies and you, young man, let's go to the apartment." Embarrassed and touched by the family scene, the cab driver had no chance to refuse, for he had promised Emily to stick around. The whole company moved into a cozy, spacious apartment. The woman, as if her life depended on it, hugged Emily again, and the head of the family extended his hand, introducing himself. "My name is Thomas, and this woman is Amber, my wife. And what's your name?" John the cabbie replied. Thomas led his guest into a spacious room with bookcases along the walls and seated him in a comfortable chair, explaining, "It's a pleasure to meet you. You appear to be my daughter's companion, and I'm very grateful to you for bringing her home. We've been waiting over 6 months for her return. Amber wanted to go after her. We knew where she was going, but I told her not to. Emily had always been independent, and she needed to get to the point of wanting to come home on her own. Let your wife and daughter have a little time alone together. In the meantime, tell me honestly, do you have serious intentions toward Emily?" John didn't lie and confessed. "I, except for the desire to help your daughter, had no other intentions. I met her yesterday by chance and I felt sorry for her. She was obviously in a bad situation and didn't know how to get out of it. I had the time and the opportunity, so I decided to do what I could. And it wasn't much, believe me." While Thomas and John had been having a lively conversation, Amber and Emily had apparently calmed down, and the lady of the house invited the men to the table. "Come on, let's go celebrate. We made an order in advance in the nearest cafe, and everything is already prepared." John tried to refuse, but he was persuaded to stay at the table. Emily touched Amber's and Thomas's hands repeatedly, and then began to apologize. "Mom, Dad, I'm so sorry if you can. I'm such a silly girl." The girl, whose tears had just recently dried up, cried again. Amber stood up and hugged her daughter, comforting her. "Come on, sweetie. Daddy and I aren't mad. The only thing is, we were so worried, not knowing where you were or what happened to you. We've been waiting for a phone call from you. If you just keep your mouth shut, it would have been easier for us. Or, if you couldn't overcome yourself, at least call someone you know and let them know how you are and what's going on." John was surprised beyond belief. After all, judging by yesterday's story, Emily regularly called her foster mom's friend, and he silently voiced his bewilderment aloud. "Emily and Amelia were in regular contact. Your friend told her not to bother you, said it wasn't the right time to talk, claimed you were here, almost cursing her." Amber was painful to watch. She was truly shocked at this unexpected turn of events. "Actually, Amelia's been out of the country for 5 months. And since then, we've only talked to her by email. She keeps calling me to visit, to get away, to relax." Emily looked just as shocked as her foster mom. "I don't understand. Amelia at the last conversation a month ago told me that visited you just the day before, and that you are still not ready to accept me with apologies." The girl shifted her gaze from Amber to Thomas, who soon asked her daughter in a strange tone, "Emily, call Amelia. Find out how she thinks our apartment is doing." Emily put the phone on speaker, and soon a woman's voice, full of concern and tenderness, came into the room. "Emily, it's so good to hear from you, my dear. Unfortunately, I can't give you any good news. Thomas is still not well. He's back in the hospital, and the doctors even hint that his days are numbered. Amber doesn't want to hear from you. When I mention you to her, she cuts the conversation off and moves on to another topic. So girl, you're just going to have to be patient a little longer." Thomas put his finger to his lips, urging his wife to be silent. And Emily, surprisingly coolly, clarified. "Amelia, pardon me for clarifying, but when was the last time you were at mine? Is this current news?" The voice from the phone answered after a long, sympathetic sigh. "Just visited yesterday. So the news is up to date. There's no point in coming back for now. Only Amber will probably go to a hospital bed, too. But don't despair. Call me if you need anything." Emily said goodbye to her foster mom's friend and turned to her dad. "How come?" "Amelia so confidently reported that you were in the hospital and was so worried about Mom, who might have gotten hurt too because of my appearance," Amber added. And about just being at our house yesterday, she said that too. I wouldn't be surprised if it turned out that Amelia wasn't trying to help and support us at all, but was pursuing her own interests, and we don't know where she really is. Maybe she's not abroad at all. Thomas, as if remembering something, asked John. Excuse me, but could you give me a ride to a place and back? I can't ask a question that needs to be solved over the phone. The cab driver, who himself was wondering what kind of game Amelia was up to with Emily's family, agreed without hesitation. When they arrived at the address Thomas had given them, John gave his passenger an attentive look. Emily's adoptive father could have been, in his opinion, a lawyer or a mid-ranking official. And the cabbie was leaning toward the second version after all. Not 15 minutes later, Thomas returned to the cab. The man looked dejected and shared his worries with John on the way home. Anyway, it looks like it was Amelia who was involved in Emily losing her head over that sneaky Michael. I just found out that it was none other than my daughter Emily's boyfriend who was in the seat next to her on the plane. That's a little too unlikely for a coincidence, don't you think? And this Michael won Emily's favor too easily, playing on common interests and tastes. She didn't like him, as I recall. And Michael and I had no idea that our girl had been charmed at the instigation of that sneaky Amelia. How cleverly she kept Emily at a distance from us. How masterfully she played on her feelings of guilt. I don't know how I'm going to tell Michael and my daughter. John, caught up in the tangled story, had to stay with Deborah's family. Thomas, softening the news, explained to his wife Amber and adopted daughter that Amelia's actions are like a premeditated action. All the coincidences were too coincidental to keep us apart. I just don't understand why she did it, he said to his wife. Do you have any thoughts about the motives of your so-called friend? Except for self-interest, of course. It could have been easier to get money out of us, but she so froze to hurt us. The woman was confused. I don't understand. We didn't seem to have any big fights. I've always helped in any way I could. Unless. Amber stopped talking and Thomas rushed her. Well, is there something you've stalled on, a thought you've had? Well, when you and I started dating, she tried to beg me to give you up to her. But after I said no, she seemed to calm down. But a 25-year-old grudge can't be the cause of this nightmare we've been living for months. Taking advantage of the silence in the room, John hurried to say goodbye, connecting with his family. Well, I wish you all happiness. Goodbye. Thomas once again thanked the cabbie for his concern. Amber handed over a bag of tissues from the cafe. These aren't even open servings. Take them. Don't say no. At least it'll save you a few times the trouble of cooking. John was returning to New York, which had become his temporary home, and he was glad that he had not passed by someone else's misfortune. May harmony be restored to their family in spite of all their trials, he thought. He wanted desperately to go to his mother's home in Chicago, but instead he overcame a momentary weakness. The man contacted the dispatch, and he even managed to take a few orders, just to delay the moment of returning to the apartment, where no one was waiting for him. As in a whirl of orders, John did not think about Emily and her family. But one evening he got a call from Deborah. John, hello, I'm calling to warn you. There's a situation. A very distinguished-looking man arrived at the orphanage an hour ago. He said he was Thomas, the father of that girl Emily. Remember, he brought some stuff as a thank you. I don't know what for. And then he asked for your phone number. I left it in my office under false pretenses, so I thought I'd call and ask you. Did you have any problems with this passenger? Can I give this unexpected guest your phone number? The cab driver was surprised, but answered. It's fine, my dear Deborah. Thank you for your concern. By the way, it was talking to you that helped Emily decide to go to her parents. So consider all these gifts as payment for your psychological help. Feel free to give me my number. Thomas seemed like a great man. And the fact that he brought things to the shelter says a lot about him. Shortly after John finished talking to Deborah, he got another call. It was Thomas, offering to meet at any convenient place and time. The cab driver, who was just going through a lull in bookings, didn't refuse, and soon the men were comfortably seated at a cafe table. The loud music playing in the hall did not interfere with the conversation. Thomas took the initiative, suggesting, John, how would you feel about changing jobs? You can't always be driving. It's a dangerous profession from every angle and not very healthy. I suggest you join my firm. There's a good vacancy in the commercial department for a good man. And I see you in that position. The cab driver was dumbfounded, but decided to come clean. "Thomas, I realize I can't drive a cab for the rest of my life. But you'll take back your offer when you hear about my criminal record. An economic conviction. Of course you won't believe this, but I wasn't really in jail for anything. Actually, it was for being too trusting. So thank you for your kindness for the offer. But we won't be able to cooperate." But Thomas is suddenly interested. "I'm very curious. I have a lot of good lawyers who can get justice. So it's quite possible to achieve full rehabilitation and even compensation," John admitted. "To be honest, I don't believe in justice at all anymore. I have a mother, so much money invested in trying to justify me, that it is terrible to remember. Only a good apartment had to be exchanged, and it was no use. I'm afraid it won't work now. Except for dashed hopes. Except that John did not take into account the character of the military father, who is accustomed to fight for the truth. The man made a suggestion. "How about this, you give me all the data on your case? I insist on that. At the same time, you take a vacation in your cab service and take an internship, paid, by the way, at my firm. If you like it, you'll get a job. If you don't like it, we'll part on friendly terms. I don't think you're risking anything, and neither am I. But it's a chance to make a difference. How's that?" John couldn't resist such possibilities and answered, "It's a deal, Thomas. Thank you very much." "You're welcome for now," the man smiled. "I'm with my wife before you. And Deborah owes me a debt of gratitude for bringing her daughter home. So this is only a small part of the thanks." John took Thomas's advice, and after a brief conversation with the cab driver and the landlord, he packed his bags and moved to the city, where a new job awaited him. Amber helped him find a place to live. And John felt as if he had wings at his back from the fact that people he didn't know suddenly took such an active part in his fate. After a preliminary call, John met with a lawyer. To the surprise of the former cab driver, his case was taken up by a charming blonde in a colored artificial coat, which did not give the impression of an intricate connoisseur of the law. But it turned out to be a delusion. "Don't worry," she explained to John's puzzled look. "My appearance is just an extra effect to deflect the eyes of my opponents. I'm just coming back from a meeting, and without too much modesty, I'm bragging that justice has won." Then the woman instantly adopted a businesslike tone and suggested to her new client, "John, let's see what's in your file. And then you calmly and honestly, without hiding any unpleasant moments, tell me everything. Let's see what ideas come up." John did not really believe that after years it would be realistic to restore justice. But the lawyer turned out to be a real fury in fighting for his case. She was so meticulously analyzed all the circumstances that it became almost obvious to the man his name, although late, but still will be cleared of shame. Even if everything was not very fast, but the result was worth the wait. John was incredibly proud to tell his mother that now they do not have to be ashamed of the sad fact in his biography. "Mom, you can imagine the lawyer got justice. Not only that, but I'm also entitled to monetary compensation, so you could look for a more comfortable apartment." The elderly woman was incredibly happy for her son, to whom it seemed that luck finally turned to face. She confessed, "Oh, Sonny, and I was stupid, and did not believe that so everything will work out. I thought again, upstart money, even if not from us this time, but from your boss, Thomas. Hey, John, thank God everything worked out. It's just a shame you didn't meet these wonderful people sooner. Then maybe your father would be alive and well now. Hey, but what's to think about now?" John's mom was silent for a moment, then asked, "Son, maybe you'll go back to your homeland now. I missed you very much. Now, no one will dare to blame and reproach you." The former cab driver also had thoughts of returning to his hometown, like angry autumn flies. But he didn't want to let down Thomas, who had entrusted him with a position in his firm. John tried not to give his boss any reason to be unhappy with him, and was frankly afraid of his reaction to the news of his decision to move. Occasionally meeting Emily, Thomas's daughter, John rejoiced at the transformation of the girl who had returned to the people who loved her. One day Emily said hello. "Excuse me, I need your help again, or rather my biological mom. I think about her every day. Let her be who she is. But I'm embarrassed that I'm doing so well, as they say, all chocolate, and she's probably barely making ends meet just to buy booze. I don't want to go back to her. I've tried it before. It just hurt everyone. I'm afraid to contact my foster parents to avoid hurting them, so I decided to contact you. Do you think it is possible to put my biological mother in some rehabilitation center? I'm working right now, and I'm willing to pay for services to bring her back to a normal human state. John had an epiphany. I know someone who can answer that question quickly. I think Deborah would be happy to hear from you and help in any way she can. And if you want my opinion, you don't have to hide your intentions from Amber and Thomas. I think they'll appreciate your generosity. You're acting like a real man, which is something to be proud of. The girl thanked the former cab driver who had changed her fate so dramatically and contacted Deborah. Soon the changes affected Emily's biological mother, because Deborah, who was used to doing everything well, took over. There was every chance that the woman would successfully rid herself of her bad habits. Emily shared updates with John about how her birth mom was doing. And despite all attempts not to fall in love, the man fell under the charm of a cute girl. They had already switched to you and occasionally went to the diner, laughing at the conventions. John was uncomfortable that he was attracted to the daughter of the boss who had done so much for him. Deciding that he should move out of harm's way, John headed over to Thomas. Of course, the subordinate did not confess to the boss that the main motive for leaving the career that had just begun to develop was a crush on Emily, and told only about the fact that mom needs care. Thomas did not become indignant, and even promised to give John the best characterization if necessary. Before leaving, no matter how hard John tried to avoid it, he still met with Emily. She caught up with him at the end of the hallway, and held him by the sleeve of his jacket, forcing him to turn to her and linger longer than was necessary for a simple greeting. "John, is it just me, or are you hiding from me?" The man had no choice but to lie. "Hello, Emily. Is it your imagination? It's just that I'm getting ready to move and have to do everything almost on the run. So I apologize if somewhere maybe I ran by without stopping." Emily's sly squint made it clear that the girl didn't believe him one bit, which was why she asked another provocative question. "Why, and now, when I caught you by the sleeve? You didn't turn around on purpose when you noticed me." John tried to turn the conversation to a neutral topic. "Emily, how is your birth mom doing? What does Deborah say? Can she be picked up from the rehab center soon?" The emotion on Emily's face disappeared. She admitted that freeing a relative from her vices is not easy, and added, "You're probably avoiding me also because you fear bad heredity." John was so indignant that he involuntarily burst out. "How stupid you are. You've had an angelic appearance and a brilliant upbringing. You're beautiful and smart. Why are you so insecure?" Emily blushed. She had certainly caught John's sympathy, but he had never paid her even disguised compliments before, hardly resembling simple friendship. The girl was scared to trust a man again, but she felt drawn to John, so she held his sleeve and offered, "My mom, Amber, has an anniversary this coming weekend. If you're interested in how my wandering story ends, be sure to come by." Emily quickly, before John realized it, begged him to come, promising him she would. "The birthday girl would be very happy to have you come. Mom considers you a family friend after you brought me home. I'll tell you, there's a huge surprise in store for everyone there." Later, John received a formal invitation from Thomas and headed to the celebration at the appointed time, not even realizing how memorable it would turn out to be. Before the party began, with only Amber, Thomas, Emily, and himself in the banquet room, the doors swung open. A slender, tanned woman with a stunning gait strode toward the birthday girl standing at the empty counter of a hired footman. Emily, seeing the guest, purposely went behind John's broad back and pulled out her cell phone. The woman, walking up to Amber, began her congratulatory speech. "Amber, heartfelt congratulations to you." Suddenly there was the trill of a cell phone. The woman glanced at the screen, dropped the call, and continued her speech with a smile, but she was interrupted again by the ringing. Amber prompted, "Amelia, I'm glad you took the time. To finish talking, take the call." The friend who had arrived from abroad waved her hands and had already switched off her smartphone when Emily called out to her. "Why do not answer me and Amelia just news? I want to know if I can go home or am I still cursed on winter evenings?" Even the tan didn't hide the blush on her guest's cheeks, but she tried to feign joy. "Emily, and you're here. How glad I am that Amber and Thomas have found the strength to forgive you and you're back together. That's a big deal. Let's celebrate." Amelia slapped herself on the forehead and laughed. "I forgot my present in the car." Wait a second, 1 foot here, 1 foot there. I'll get it. Amelia couldn't get past Thomas and John at the door, however. Giggling, she hurried to the emergency exit. But her escape-like maneuver was interrupted by the birthday girl. Amelia, please explain why you hate me so much that you decided to separate me even from my daughter. I have only once failed to yield to you, and you've invented a trial you wouldn't wish on an enemy. Just answer me why. Panic flashed across the guest's face, but she admitted it was out of jealousy. You've always been the best, and I'm always in the background. You think it's easy to fall short. I've been looking for your weakness for a long time. Your husband turned out to be your husband, so I went after your daughter with the help of Michael the catcher. Then it was a matter of technique. You can't prove my guilt, and you can kiss your money goodbye. But Amelia was wrong. Thanks to Thomas's connections, Michael was extradited, and together with Amelia he was put under investigation. A little later, they were sentenced. Emily and John's relationship grew more tender by the day. Of course, it didn't go unnoticed for long, as both Amber and Thomas were now closely watching every change in their child's mood. The girl believed in love again, and it was impossible not to notice it. John already had his labor book in hand when his boss invited him into the office where his wife and daughter were already there. Smiling, Thomas said, "Now that's a role I never thought I'd ever find myself in, but John seems to be too decent. My wife and I have long noticed that you have a soft spot for Emily and are trying to keep your feelings in check. Well, we don't mind you two dating. We even agree that the two of you should go to your homeland to think about and decide where you'd like to live. Amber and I agree to whatever you decide in advance." John and Emily couldn't believe their happiness. After a visit to the man's mom in her hometown, they decided to take her in and settle closer to the girl's adoptive parents. This decision satisfied everyone without exception,